Dad slid the heavy envelope across the table to my sister like he was crowning a queen, then looked me dead in the eye. He told me they gave my wedding fund to her because she deserved a real wedding. I did not flinch. I just turned to my fiancé. He stood up, calm as a judge, lifted his phone, and asked my father if he wanted him to explain his profession or explain exactly what he just did with stolen money. My name is Bella Phillips, and up until the moment the envelope slid across the mahogany table, I was under the impression that we were simply having dinner. We were seated in one of those dimly lit, aggressively expensive steakhouses in uptown Charlotte, the kind of place where the leather banquettes are deep enough to swallow you whole and the waiters whisper the specials like they are sharing state secrets. My father, Raymond Bishop, sat at the head of the table, naturally. He occupied space with the entitlement of a man who believed the world had been poured into a mold specifically designed for his comfort. To his right sat my mother, Diane, sipping her Chardonnay with a practiced detachment. Across from me sat my younger sister, Mallory, and her fiancé, Caleb. I had spent the last 30 minutes picking at a wedge salad, trying to keep the conversation light. I talked about the weather, which had been unseasonably humid for North Carolina in October. I talked about the traffic on I-85. I avoided talking about my own wedding, which was 6 months away, because I had learned a long time ago that sharing my joy with this table was like throwing fresh meat into a cage of lions. You did not feed the beast. You starved it, kept your head down, and hoped to survive the meal without bite marks. But tonight, the beast was hungry. Raymond cleared his throat. It was a wet, guttural sound that commanded immediate silence. He reached into the inner pocket of his blazer. The movement was theatrical. He wanted us to watch. He wanted an audience. He pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope. It looked heavy. It looked important. I watched his hand. It was large, manicured, with a heavy gold signet ring on the pinky finger. He placed the envelope on the polished wood and placed 2 fingers on top of it. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, he slid it past the breadbasket, past the sweating carafe of water, and past the centerpiece of white lilies. He did not slide it to me. He slid it to Mallory. The envelope stopped right against the rim of her wineglass. Mallory looked down at it, then up at our father. Her eyes widened. But it was a performance. She knew. I could see the tiny, suppressed twitch at the corner of her mouth. She knew exactly what was inside that envelope before he even took it out of his jacket. Raymond laced his fingers together and leaned back. He looked me dead in the eye. There was no shame in his gaze. There was only a cold, hard challenge. "We gave your wedding fund to her," he said. His voice was flat. Matter of fact, the air left the immediate vicinity of my chair. I sat frozen, my fork hovering halfway to my mouth. I lowered it slowly to the plate, the metal making a soft clink that sounded like a gunshot in the sudden silence. "Excuse me," I said. My voice was steady, which surprised me. I felt like the floor was tilting under my feet. "Your mother and I discussed it," Raymond continued, speaking over me as if I were a television playing in the background. "Mallory has a vision. She has expectations. We looked at the numbers. Bella, we had to make a choice about where the resources would do the most good. We decided to transfer the entirety of the saved funds to your sister. She deserves a real wedding." The phrase hung in the air between us. A real wedding. I looked at my mother. Diane was studying the label on the wine bottle, refusing to meet my gaze. She nodded, a small, jerky motion, as if confirming a decision she had been bullied into accepting but was now claiming as her own. "It is just logical." "Darling," my mother murmured, still looking at the bottle. "Mallory is looking at the country club. The guest list is over 200 people. You know how these things add up. You and Ethan, well, you are more low-key. We figured you would be happy with something simple. Maybe a backyard thing, or the courthouse." Mallory reached out and touched the envelope. She did not open it. She just rested her hand on it, claiming it. She smiled at me, a tight, pitying expression that made my stomach turn. It was the smile of the victor who wants to appear benevolent while standing on your neck. "Do not be mad, Bella," Mallory said. "Honestly, it would be a waste on you. You do not even like being the center of attention. This way, the money actually goes to something memorable." I felt the blood drain from my face, my hands, resting in my lap, clenched into fists so tight my fingernails dug into my palms. It was not just the money. Money was a tool. Money was currency. This was about what the money represented. I knew exactly where that fund had come from. I remembered the day it started. I remembered the smell of lavender and old paper in my grandmother's sunroom. I remembered her voice, raspy but strong, telling me that she was putting something aside for me, specifically for me, so that one day I would not have to ask anyone for permission to be happy. Raymond was claiming he gave it. He was claiming ownership of a sacrifice he never made. I looked at my father. He was waiting for me to cry. He was waiting for the outburst. He thrived on the drama of my disappointment. It confirmed his narrative that I was emotional, unstable, and ungrateful. He wanted me to scream so he could call me hysterical. He wanted me to beg so he could say no. I did not blink. I did not let a single tear form. I felt a cold, jagged stone of anger settle in the pit of my stomach. It was heavy, and it was sharp, and it gave me something to anchor myself to. I turned to my fiancé. Ethan Mercer was sitting beside me. He had not said a word since we sat down. He had eaten his steak with precise, efficient movements. My family thought he was boring. They thought he was a mid-level bureaucrat pushing paper in some nameless office. They judged him by his off-the-rack suits and his refusal to brag about his paycheck. They mistook his silence for weakness. They mistook his politeness for submission. Ethan placed his napkin on the table. He did not throw it. He folded it once, neatly, and set it beside his plate. Then he stood up. He did not rush. He rose to his full height, 6 feet and 2 inches of calm, controlled energy. The movement drew the eye of the tables around us. The waiter, who had been approaching with a dessert menu, stopped in his tracks, sensing the shift in atmospheric pressure. Ethan reached into his pocket and withdrew his phone. He did not unlock it immediately. He held it in his hand, tapping the corner against his thumb. Looking down at my father with an expression I had never seen directed at a family member. It was the look a judge gives a defendant who has just perjured themselves on the stand. It was devoid of anger. It was purely analytical. Mallory let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a nervous sound. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice shrill. "Are you trying to intimidate us? Ethan, sit down. You are embarrassing Bella." Ethan did not look at her. He did not acknowledge that she had spoken. His eyes were locked on Raymond. "I have a question," Ethan said. His voice was low, baritone, and carried perfectly over the hum of the restaurant without him needing to raise it. Raymond scoffed. He picked up his wineglass, swirling the red liquid violently. "Sit down, boy," Raymond said. "This is a family matter. It does not concern you." "It concerns me," Ethan said, taking a step closer to the table, "because you just admitted to a transaction involving my future wife, and I want to clarify the terms of that transaction. You do not demand anything from me," Raymond snapped. "I made a decision. I manage the finances of this family. I decide who gets what." Ethan unlocked his phone. He swiped once, his thumb moving with practiced efficiency. He looked at the screen, then back at Raymond. "I just want to ask one specific question," Ethan said. The tone was conversational, which made it terrifying. "Are you absolutely sure that money is yours?" The question hung there. Raymond's face turned a shade of mottled red. He slammed his wineglass down on the table. Wine sloshed over the rim, staining the white tablecloth like a fresh wound. "Of course it is mine," Raymond shouted. People at nearby tables turned to look. He did not care. His ego was threatened. "I am the head of this house. Everything in this family goes through me. I earned it. I saved it. I decide where it goes. And I decided that Mallory needs it more. Bella can wait. Bella can make do. That is final." Raymond pointed a finger at Ethan. "You watch your tone with me." He spat. You think because you are marrying my daughter you have a say in my ledger? You are nothing. You are a nobody. Ethan looked at the phone again. He seemed to be reading a text, or perhaps a document. He nodded, once, to himself. It was a confirmation. Then he looked up. The warmth was gone from his eyes. He looked at Raymond, not as a father-in-law, not as an elder, but as a target, if that is your position, Ethan said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming lethal in its stillness. Then I suggest you do not touch an account that you do not stand as the signatory on. The silence that followed was absolute. Mallory's smile faltered. Caleb shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Diane stopped breathing. Raymond opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He blinked, the bluster momentarily choked off by the precision of the threat. Ethan turned the phone screen toward him. I could not see what was on it, but I saw Raymond's eyes focus on the glowing display. I saw the color drain from his face, replaced by a gray, sickly pallor. Do you want me to explain to everyone at this table what I do for a living? Ethan asked, tilting his head slightly. Or do you want me to explain exactly what you just did with someone else's money? Raymond stared at the phone, his hand, which had been reaching for the wine glass again, frozen midair. Ethan waited. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. When Raymond did not answer, Ethan slipped the phone back into his pocket. He reached down and took my hand. His grip was warm and solid. We are leaving, Ethan said. He pulled me up from the chair. My legs felt weak, but his strength held me upright. I grabbed my purse. I did not look at my mother. I did not look at my sister. I looked only at my father, who was staring at the tablecloth, at the red stains spreading toward the envelope he had so proudly delivered. We walked away. The restaurant seemed to part for us. The sounds of clinking silverware and murmuring voices faded into a dull roar in my ears. I could feel the eyes of my family burning into my back, but for the first time in my life, I did not care what they were thinking. As we pushed through the heavy oak doors and stepped out into the cool, humid night of Charlotte, I realized my heart was racing, not from fear, but from adrenaline. Ethan did not stop walking until we reached his sedan parked down the block. He opened the passenger door for me, before I got in. I looked at him. Under the street lamp, his face was grim. He knew. I whispered, "How did you know?" Ethan looked back toward the restaurant. He adjusted his cuff. "Because, Bella," he said quietly, "people like your father always think they are the smartest person in the room until they meet someone who actually reads the fine print." He closed the door, shutting out the noise of the city. As he walked around to the driver's side, I looked at my hands. They were no longer fists. They were open, and for the first time in years, I did not feel like the girl who had to wait for scraps. I felt like someone who had just watched the first shot of a war being fired. And the scary part was, I was ready for it. We drove in silence for the first 10 minutes. The city lights blurred past the window. I watched the reflection of the dashboard on the glass. My mind was racing, trying to piece together what Ethan had implied. The account, the signatory. Raymond had always handled the money. That was the rule. That was the law of the Bishop household. He controlled the mortgage, the car payments, the tuition. He made us ask for everything. He made us write itemized lists for school supplies. He made my mother ask for grocery money. But the wedding fund was different. Grandma Margot had told me, years ago, when I was 18, she had pulled me aside in her garden, her hands covered in soil. "I am putting this away for you, Bella, for when you find the one. Do not let Raymond spend it on golf clubs." I had assumed, foolishly, that she had given the money to him to hold. I assumed he had simply merged it with his own accounts, as he did with everything else. But Ethan's question, "Are you sure that money is yours?" suggested something else entirely. It suggested a line had been crossed, a legal line. I looked over at Ethan. He was driving with one hand on the wheel, his eyes scanning the road. He looked exactly the same as he always did, calm, collected, unremarkable to the untrained eye. But now, I saw the tension in his jaw. I saw the calculation in his gaze. Who are you? I asked softly. Ethan glanced at me, a small, tired smile touching his lips. I am just the guy who loves you. Bella, he said, and I am the guy who is going to make sure you get what is yours. He reached over and squeezed my hand. But we need to go see your grandmother. He added, Tonight. Why? I asked. Because, Ethan said, his voice hardening again, your father just declared war, and the first thing he's going to do once the shock wears off is try to cover his tracks. We need to get to Margot before he does. I nodded. I did not argue. I pulled out my phone. 3 missed calls from my mother. A text from Mallory that read, You are so dramatic. Come back and apologize to Dad. I deleted the text. I silenced the phone. Drive, I said. Ethan accelerated. The engine hummed. A low, powerful sound. We turned onto the highway, heading away from the city, away from the steakhouse, and toward the small, quiet house with the overgrown garden where the only person who had ever truly loved me was sleeping. Unaware that her son-in-law had just tried to sell her granddaughter's future, I watched the skyline of Charlotte recede in the rearview mirror. It looked pretty from a distance, glittering and perfect, but up close, you could see the cracks. You could see the dirt. Tonight. The cracks had finally split open, and I was going to make sure the whole thing came crumbling down as we drove through the dark, stretching highways of North Carolina, leaving the suffocating atmosphere of the steakhouse behind us. My mind drifted back to the house I had grown up in. It was a large, colonial-style structure in a subdivision where the lawns were manicured to within an inch of their lives, and the mailboxes were made of brick that cost more than my first car. To the outside world, it was a symbol of the American dream, a testament to Raymond Bishop's success as a regional sales director for a pharmaceutical logistics firm. To me, it was a museum dedicated to the worship of my younger sister. If you walked through the front door of my parents' house, the first thing you would see was the hallway. We did not call it a hallway. In my head, I always referred to it as the shrine. The walls were painted a soft, creamy beige, specifically chosen because it made the gold frames pop, and there were dozens of them, from floor to ceiling. The walls were plastered with the chronological history of Mallory's greatness. There was Mallory at 5 years old, holding a ribbon for a pony ride. Mallory at 10, clutching a spelling bee trophy that was almost as big as her head. Mallory at 16, beaming in her cheerleading uniform, the captain's patch clearly visible. There were framed report cards with straight A's highlighted in yellow marker. There were acceptance letters to summer camps, certificates of participation, and eventually, the crown jewel, her college diploma, framed in mahogany with velvet matting. I lived in that house for 18 years, yet if you looked at those walls, you would assume I was a ghost. My presence in the Bishop household existed in the negative space. I was the gap between the frames. I was the silence between the applause. I learned very early on that there was a finite amount of attention available in our ecosystem, and Mallory consumed all of it like a black hole. It was not that my parents were abusive in the way you see in movies. They did not beat me. They did not starve me. They simply looked right through me. I grew up feeling like a guest in my own home. I learned to walk softly on the hardwood floors so I would not disturb my father while he was watching the news. I learned to wash my own dishes immediately after using them because leaving a spoon in the sink was a sign of disrespect, whereas Mallory could leave a trail of half-eaten yogurt cups across the kitchen island without consequence. I learned that my achievements, a second-place art prize, a B+ in advanced calculus, were met with a distracted nod, while Mallory's sneezing fit was treated as a medical emergency. That feeling of being a permanent inconvenience shaped me. It made me self-reliant in a way that terrified my mother and annoyed my father. By the time I was 22, I had stopped asking them for anything. I built a career out of thin air, working as a freelance graphic designer under the name Cloverline Creative. It was not a Fortune 500 company. It was just me, a laptop, and a subscription to design software, working from a small apartment that smelled like coffee and printer ink. I designed logos for local bakeries, laid out brochures for tech startups, and reformatted wedding invitations for brides who were far kinder than my sister. I paid my own rent. I paid for my own car insurance. I bought my own groceries. Every dollar I earned felt heavy and real because it was mine. My father called it my little hobby. He asked when I was going to get a real job with benefits. He did not understand that the benefit I valued most was the fact that I did not owe him a single cent. There was only one place in my childhood where I felt solid, where I felt like I actually occupied space and mass. That was my grandmother Margot's house. Margot Hale was my mother's mother. But she could not have been more different from Diane if she had been born on another planet. Diane was all hairspray, pearls, and nervous energy, constantly scanning the room to see who was watching. Margot was soil, denim, and silence. She lived in a small, weathered cottage about 20 minutes from my parents' subdivision. Her yard was a chaotic, beautiful explosion of wildflowers, herbs, and ancient oak trees that blocked out the sky. I used to escape to Margot's house on weekends. I would sit on her back porch, shelling peas or just watching the bees navigate the lavender bushes. Margot did not ask about my grades. She did not ask why I was not more like Mallory. She would just hand me a glass of iced tea, sit in her rocking chair, and talk about the things that actually mattered. The house is too loud. Bella. She told me once, I was 16, crying because Raymond had forgotten my birthday while planning a surprise party for Mallory's half-birthday. Margot was pruning a rosebush, her hands gloved in thick leather, snipping away the dead wood with surgical precision. "What do you mean?" I had asked, wiping my nose on my sleeve. "Your father likes noise," she said, the shears making a sharp snapping sound. "He likes the sound of his own voice and the sound of people clapping for him, but you have to be careful with noise. The louder the house, the more truth is hidden." She looked at me then, her eyes sharp and clear behind her wire-rimmed glasses. "You are quiet," she said. "That is your power. You hear the things the rest of them are too busy shouting over. I carried that with me for years. It was the armor I wore when I met Ethan." Bringing a boyfriend home to the Bishops was usually a disaster. I had brought a guy home in college, a sweet, aspiring architect, and Raymond had dismantled his self-esteem over the course of a single barbecue by asking invasive questions about his student loans. But with Ethan, I did things differently. I took him to meet Margot first. It was a Sunday in late spring. Ethan wore a pair of worn-in jeans and a gray t-shirt. He did not bring flowers or a bottle of wine to impress her. He brought a toolbox because I had mentioned the hinge on her screen door was squeaking. He spent the first hour fixing the door and tightening the loose railing on the porch steps. He did not try to charm her. He did not launch into a rehearsed speech about his prospects. He just worked, his movements efficient and careful. When he was done, he sat on the porch swing, accepted a glass of lemonade, and listened to Margot talk about the soil pH levels of her hydrangeas for 45 minutes. Margot watched him the way a hawk watches a field mouse, but there was no malice in it. She was measuring him. Later, when we were walking to my car, Margot pulled me aside. She wiped her hands on her apron and nodded toward Ethan, who was waiting by the driver's side, looking up at the trees. "He is a good one," she said. "You think so?" I asked, feeling a flutter of hope. "He does not feel the need to fill the silence," she said, "and he listens when you speak. Keep him." Meeting my parents was a different story. I waited 3 months before introducing Ethan to Raymond and Diane. I knew what would happen, and I wanted to delay the inevitable judgment. When the dinner finally happened, it went exactly as I feared. Raymond sat at the head of the table, interrogating Ethan like a suspect in a felony case. "So, Ethan," Raymond had said, cutting into his steak, "what is it you do exactly?" "Bella says you are in consulting." "That is a very vague term. I work in risk analysis and financial compliance," Ethan said. His voice was polite, but brief. Raymond frowned. "Who do you work for?" "I contract with several firms," Ethan said, "mostly dealing with corporate liability and internal auditing." Raymond rolled his eyes. "So you are a freelancer, like Bella and her little art projects. No stability, no corporate ladder." "I do all right," Ethan said, taking a sip of water. He offered no salary figures. He dropped no names of big clients. He did not try to sell himself. To my parents, this was a sign of failure in their world. If you were successful, you shouted it from the rooftops. If you were quiet about your work, it meant you were ashamed of it. After that dinner, the verdict was delivered. My mother took me into the kitchen and told me, in a hushed, tragic whisper, that Ethan was nice, but he was not a provider. She said he lacked ambition. She said he was not worthy of the Bishop legacy. Mallory made jokes about how I would be supporting him for the rest of my life, but I saw something they did not. I lived with Ethan. I saw the way he moved through the world. I noticed that he never posted on social media. He had no Facebook, no Instagram, no LinkedIn profile that the public could access. When we went out to events, he always stepped out of the frame when a camera appeared. If someone tried to tag him in a photo, he would politely ask them to take it down. At first, I thought he was just shy. But then I noticed the way he checked the locks on our apartment door every night, not out of fear, but out of habit. I noticed that when people asked him the name of his company, he gave a generic answer that changed slightly depending on who was asking. It was never a lie, exactly. It was just never the whole truth. He was protective of his identity in a way that felt deliberate. He was a man who understood the value of information and the danger of giving it away freely. One afternoon, shortly before the engagement, I was sitting with Margot in her sunroom. Ethan was outside, helping her till a patch of earth for the winter vegetables. We watched him through the glass. He was working rhythmically, his back strong, his focus absolute. My father thinks he is a loser. I told Margot quietly, he thinks Ethan has no drive because he does not brag about his bonus checks. Margot took a sip of her tea. She watched Ethan stop to wipe sweat from his brow. He looked around the yard, scanning the perimeter, before going back to work. Your father is a fool, Margot said. She set her cup down on the saucer with a sharp clatter. Raymond thinks power is a loud noise. He thinks if you are not roaring, you are not a lion. She turned to me, her expression serious. That boy out there? Margot pointed a trembling finger at Ethan. He is not weak, Bella. He is calm, and he is calm like someone who knows more than he says. You be careful with a man who is that quiet. Usually, it means he is holding a very heavy deck of cards, and he is just waiting for the right time to play them. I looked back at Ethan. He seemed so normal, so average, but as I watched him drive the shovel into the earth, breaking the hard ground with a single, fluid motion, I realized Margot was right. Ethan was not hiding because he was empty. He was hiding because he was full of things that my family could not even begin to comprehend. And as I sat in the passenger seat of his car, speeding toward Margot's house to save the only inheritance I had ever been promised, I prayed that whatever cards Ethan was holding, they were enough to bury my father's arrogance once and for all. To understand how the explosion at the steakhouse happened, you have to understand the pressure that built up inside the pipe during the 6 weeks prior. It did not start with the envelope sliding across the table. It started with a 3-ring binder that weighed more than a newborn baby. Mallory called it the vision. She summoned us to the family living room on a Tuesday evening, a month and a half before the dinner, to unveil her plans. She dropped the binder onto the coffee table with a thud that made the china rattle. Inside were color-coded tabs, fabric swatches, and printouts of venues that looked like European castles. I had been engaged for 2 months longer than Mallory, but my planning consisted of a Pinterest board and a saved folder of budget-friendly venues. Mallory, however, had turned her wedding into a military operation. She flipped the binder open to the venue section. We are going with the Gilded Oak, Mallory announced, pointing to a photo of a sprawling estate with weeping willows and a ballroom that featured crystal chandeliers the size of small cars. It is the only place in Charlotte that can accommodate the aesthetic I want. The rental fee is $12,000 for the Saturday, but that includes the tables. My mother, Diane, clasped her hands together and beamed. She looked at the photo as if it were a picture of a grandchild. It is perfect, Diane said. It is elegant. It is sophisticated. It is exactly what a real wedding should look like. There was that phrase again, a real wedding. Diane had used it 5 times in the last hour. When I showed her a photo of a charming refurbished barn I liked, she had wrinkled her nose and said barns were fine for parties. But Mallory needed a venue for a real wedding. The implication was subtle but sharp. My wedding was a formality. Mallory's wedding was a coronation. Mallory turned the page. The catering quote was visible. $150 per plate. I did the math in my head. For 200 guests, that was $30,000 just for food. That did not include the open bar, the cake, or the midnight snack station she insisted on. I looked at my father. Raymond was sitting in his recliner, reading the sports section on his tablet. He did not even blink at the numbers. "Dad," I said, keeping my voice neutral, "that is a lot of money just for the deposit." Raymond waved a hand dismissively without looking up. "Do not worry about the money, Bella," he said. "I have been moving things around. I am holding the funds. It is all under control." He used that phrase often. Holding the funds. It was a vague, nebulous term that made him sound like a banker protecting our interests. He never said he owned the funds. He said he was holding them. I assumed he meant he was managing the savings accounts he had set up for us when we were children, combined with the contribution Grandma Margot had mentioned years ago, but looking at the numbers in Mallory's binder, I felt a knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach. The math did not work. I knew my father's salary was good, but it was not infinite. And I knew he had just bought a new boat last summer. Later that week, the first real crack appeared, though I was too blind to see it for what it was. I went to visit Grandma Margot on a Thursday afternoon. She had called me, sounding slightly confused about a piece of mail, but when I arrived, she was out in the garden, seemingly fine. I went inside to make us some tea and noticed a pile of mail on her kitchen counter. Margot was meticulous. She opened her mail the day it arrived and filed it immediately. Seeing a pile was unusual. I began sorting through it to help her. Junk mail, a catalog for bulbs, a utility bill, and then a business envelope from the bank. It had been ripped open, not with a letter opener, but jaggedly, as if someone had been in a rush. The letter inside was halfway pulled out. I saw the bank logo, and I saw the words "Notification of Transfer" in bold black letters. I pulled it out. It was a confirmation of a wire transfer for $4,000. The recipient was redacted or cut off by the way the paper had been torn. But I could see the date. It was 3 days ago. I frowned. Margot lived on a fixed pension. She did not spend $4,000 on anything. She bought seeds, yarn, and groceries. I walked out to the garden, holding the paper. "Grandma," I said, "did you buy something big recently?" Margot looked up from her kneeling pad. She adjusted her sun hat and squinted at the paper in my hand. For a second, a shadow passed over her face. It looked like fear. Or maybe shame. "No," she said quickly. "No. I have not bought anything. This letter says $4,000 was moved from your savings." I said. Margot stood up, wiping the dirt from her knees. She walked over to me and took the paper from my hand. She did not look at it. She folded it up and shoved it into the pocket of her gardening apron. "It is probably just a mistake," she said. "Or maybe it is for the taxes on the house. I get confused with the paperwork sometimes. Your father handles the big things for me now. He said he would take care of the bills so I do not have to worry." "Dad handles your accounts?" I asked. "He helps," she said. She turned back to her roses, effectively ending the conversation. "Look at these aphids, Bella. They are eating the leaves alive." She changed the subject so fast it made my head spin, but I let it go. I wanted to believe that Raymond was just being a dutiful son-in-law. I wanted to believe that my grandmother was just getting older and forgetting things. That night, I told Ethan about the letter. We were sitting on the floor of our apartment, eating takeout noodles. Ethan stopped eating. He put his chopsticks down and looked at me with that intense, analytical gaze that I had come to rely on. $4,000, he repeated. "And she did not know what it was for?" "She said it might be taxes," I said. "She said Dad handles it." Ethan was silent for a long moment. "Bella," he said finally, "you need to separate your wedding finances from your father. Completely." "I cannot." I said. "He has the fund. The money Grandma put aside for me. It is in an account he manages. If I ask for it now, he will think I do not trust him. It will start a war. Maybe a war is necessary, Ethan said. He leaned back against the sofa. Look, we can pay for our own wedding. We can do it small. 50 guests? A nice dinner. We do not need his money, but it is not his money. I insisted. It is mine. It was a gift from Grandma. If I walk away from it, I am letting him take what she wanted me to have. And besides, if I ask for a separate budget, he will take it out on Mom. He will make her life miserable. Ethan sighed. He did not push it, but I saw the wheels turning in his head. He started spending more time on his laptop in the evenings, with multiple windows open, researching things he would not tell me about. 2 weeks later, the tension in the Bishop house ratcheted up another notch. Raymond called me over to the house on a Sunday. When I arrived, he was in his home office, a room that smelled of cedar and stale cigar smoke. He was sitting behind his massive oak desk, a stack of papers in front of him. I need you to sign some things, he said, not offering me a seat. What things? I asked, walking over. Just formalities, he said. Since we are releasing funds for the weddings, the bank needs confirmation that you are the beneficiary. It is just a standard support confirmation. He pushed a document toward me. It was dense text, single-spaced. I reached for it to pick it up and read it. But his hand shot out and pressed down on the top of the page. You do not need to read the boilerplate, Bella, he said, his voice tight. It is standard legal jargon. It just says you agree to accept financial assistance from the family trust. Just sign at the bottom so I can get the checks cut. Mallory already signed hers. I looked at the paper. I could see phrases like indemnification and waiver of liability. Can I take a copy home to read? I asked. Raymond laughed, a harsh barking sound. For God's sake, Bella, do you think I am trying to scam you? I am your father. I am trying to give you money. Do not make this difficult. The bank closes in an hour. If you do not sign, the transfer gets delayed, and Mallory loses her deposit on the florist. Do you want to be the reason your sister loses her flowers? Guilt. It was his favorite weapon. He knew I would never want to be the cause of a problem. I hesitated. I looked at the bottom of the page. There was a section marked Annex A, but there was no Annex A attached. Where is the rest of it? I asked. It is in the file, he said impatiently. Just sign the damn paper. Bella, I signed. I signed because I was conditioned to obey him. I signed because I wanted to believe that he was just a grumpy, controlling father, not a thief. As soon as the ink was dry, he snatched the paper away and slid it into a folder. Good, he said. Now go help your mother in the kitchen. I walked out of the office feeling dirty. I felt like I had just agreed to something I did not understand. The final warning sign came from Mallory herself, and it was the most chilling of all because of how casually it was delivered. We were at a bridal shop a few days later. Mallory was trying on a veil that cost more than my monthly rent. She was admiring herself in the mirror, turning her head from side to side. I am worried about the budget. Mal, I said, sitting on the plush velvet bench. Dad is spending a fortune. What about Grandma? Does she have enough for her care if he is draining the accounts for this? Mallory laughed. She adjusted the lace on her head. Oh, please, she said. Grandma does not need money. She has the house. She has her garden. What does an 80-year-old woman need cash for? She is happy just playing in the dirt. Besides, she would want us to have this. It is a legacy. She said it with such absolute conviction. In Mallory's mind, Grandma was not a person with a future or needs. She was a relic, a resource to be mined. The money was wasted on an old woman, but it was essential for Mallory's 3-tier fondant cake. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and I realized she did not just think she was entitled to the money. She thought she was doing the world a favor by spending it. That was the moment I knew. I knew that whatever fund Raymond was talking about, it was not a savings account he had built up from his salary. It was something else, and they were all in on it. I went home and told Ethan everything. I told him about the torn bank letter. I told him about the paper Raymond made me sign without reading. I told him about Mallory's comment. Ethan listened. He did not say I told you so. He just nodded. Okay, he said. That is enough. Enough for what? I asked. Enough to start digging. He said. 2 days later, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Mallory. Pack your bags. We are going away this weekend. Dad booked a trip for all of us. We need to finalize the wedding fund details before the deposits are due. No excuses. I stared at the screen. Finalize the fund. It sounded so official, so final. I showed the text to Ethan. He read it, and a strange, cold look crossed his face. Reply to her. Ethan said, Tell her we are coming. Are we? I asked. Yes, Ethan said, but we are not going there to sign checks. Bella, we are going there to see exactly how deep the rot goes. He stood up and walked to the closet, pulling out his overnight bag. Get your things, he said. The storm is coming, and I want to be standing right in the middle of it when it breaks. I looked at the text again. I did not know it then, but that weekend trip was not a celebration. It was an ambush, and thanks to Ethan, we were about to walk into it with our eyes wide open. The Charlotte Douglas International Airport was a hive of chaotic energy on a Friday morning. The air smelled of burnt coffee and floor wax, and the noise was a constant, thrumming roar of rolling suitcases, announcements over the intercom, and the collective anxiety of 5,000 people trying to be somewhere else. My family stood in a cluster near the check-in kiosks of Delta Airlines. We looked like a picture-perfect advertisement for a multi-generational family vacation. Raymond was wearing his navy blazer and khaki pants, the uniform of a man who expects to be upgraded to first class. Diane was fussing with the zipper of her carry-on, checking her makeup in a compact mirror. Mallory and Caleb were dressed in matching athleisure wear, looking bored and scrolling through their phones. And then there was Grandma Margot. She stood slightly apart from the group, clutching the handle of a small, floral-patterned overnight bag. She was wearing her Sunday best, a pale blue dress suit with a pearl brooch on the lapel. She had gone to the hairdresser the day before to get her silver curls set. She looked small in the cavernous terminal, like a delicate porcelain figurine placed in the middle of a stampede. I stood next to her, adjusting the collar of her coat. Are you nervous, Grandma? I asked. Margot smiled, patting my hand. It was a trembling, tentative smile. Just a little, she admitted. I have not flown in 10 years. Bella, not since your grandfather passed. But your father insisted. He said it would be good for me to see the ocean again. I felt a pang of guilt mixed with a strange sense of relief. Despite my suspicions, despite the weird bank letter, Raymond had invited her. He had paid for her ticket. He had included her. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was just being paranoid, infected by Ethan's cynicism. Ethan was standing behind me, watching Raymond with the unblinking intensity of a security camera. He had not said much since we arrived at the curb. He just carried the bags and observed. We are up, Raymond announced, clapping his hands together. Let us get this show on the road. The lounge is waiting. We moved toward the counter. The agent, a tired-looking woman with frizzy hair and a name tag that read Brenda, waved us forward. Raymond stepped up first, slapping his passport onto the counter with authoritative confidence. Bishop party, he said loudly. 7 of us. We should be all linked under my confirmation code. Brenda typed on her keyboard. The rhythmic clacking sound was the only thing I could hear over the pounding of my own heart. She frowned, adjusted her glasses, and typed again. I see you. Mr. Bishop, she said, and Mrs. Bishop, and the 2 younger couples. She looked up, her gaze drifting over to Margot. I have 6 passengers checked in and ready to go, Brenda said. Raymond gestured grandly at Margot. And my mother-in-law, Margot Hale, he said. She is the 7th. Brenda went back to typing. She hit the enter key a few times. She scrolled down. She scrolled up, then she stopped. The clacking ceased. I am sorry, sir, Brenda said. I do not have a reservation for a Margot Hale. The words hung in the air, sharp and distinct. Raymond let out a dramatic sigh. The kind of noise a parent makes when a child spills milk. Check again, he commanded. I booked it myself. It was weeks ago. Bishop party, destination Key West. I am looking at the entire manifest. Sir, Brenda said, her voice remaining professional but firm. I have 6 tickets booked under your credit card. There is no 7th ticket. There is no record of a Margot Hale on this flight, or any other flight today. I felt the blood drain from my face. I looked at Margot. She was still smiling, but the smile had frozen on her face. It was a mask. Her grip on the floral bag tightened until her knuckles were white. She stared straight ahead at the digital screen behind the agent's head, trying to maintain her dignity while her world quietly collapsed. Diane stepped forward, her laugh nervous and high-pitched. Oh, it must be a computer glitch, she said, waving her hand. You know how these systems are. Just print the pass. Dear, we can sort it out. I cannot just print a pass for a seat that does not exist. Ma'am, Brenda said, the flight is oversold. Every seat is full. Mallory let out a groan. She dropped her bag on the floor. Oh my God. Seriously? She snapped. We are going to be late for the lounge. Dad, just fix it. Buy her a new ticket or something. Raymond turned to us, throwing his hands up in a gesture of helpless frustration. I do not understand it, he said, lying through his teeth. I distinctly remember adding her, this airline is incompetent. Ethan stepped out from behind me. He moved smoothly, sliding into the space between Raymond and the counter. He did not look at Raymond. He looked at Brenda. Excuse me, Ethan said. His voice was calm, contrasting with the rising panic of the group. If there was a booking that got lost or canceled, there would be a record of the cancellation, correct? Or a record of an attempted transaction. Brenda looked at Ethan. She seemed relieved to be talking to someone sane. Yes, sir, she said. The system logs everything, even if a payment fails. We see the attempt. Ethan nodded. And do you see any attempt to book a ticket for Margot Hale associated with this group? He asked. Brenda typed one more time. She shook her head. No, sir. She said, I see the block booking for 6 people made on September 12th. There was never a 7th name added. The silence that followed was deafening. It was not a mistake. It was not a glitch. Raymond had booked 6 tickets. He had planned for 6 people. He had invited Margot, watched her pack her bag, watched her get dressed up, and driven her to the airport, knowing full well she had no seat on the plane. I turned to my father. Rage, hot and blinding, flooded my vision. You never booked it, I said. My voice was shaking. Raymond's face turned red, but not from shame, from anger at being caught. Do not be ridiculous. Bella, he barked. I must have forgotten to click the final confirm button. It was a chaotic day. I have a lot on my plate. It is a simple administrative error. Mallory checked her Apple Watch. Okay, well, the flight leaves in 50 minutes, she said. Dad, just buy another ticket. I looked at Brenda. Is there a seat on the next flight? I asked. Brenda looked sympathetic. I can get her on a flight at 4 in the afternoon, she said. But since it is a same-day purchase, the fare is $850. Raymond's eyes bulged. $800? He shouted. For a one-way ticket? That is highway robbery. I am not paying that. Dad, I said, stepping closer to him, you have to pay it. You messed up. You cannot just leave her here. Raymond adjusted his jacket. He looked at his watch. He looked at the security line. He looked everywhere except at Margot. It is too much, he said firmly. It is a waste of money. We are only going for 3 days. By the time she gets there, the weekend will be half over. It does not make sense. He turned to Margot. He put a hand on her shoulder. She flinched, a tiny movement that only I saw. Mom, he said, using that patronizing tone he reserved for children and customer service representatives. I am so sorry. This is a mess. But honestly, the travel is going to be exhausting for you anyway. Maybe this is a sign. You should go home and rest. We will bring you back a souvenir. Diane nodded vigorously. Yes, Mom, Diane said. It is for the best. You know how your back gets on planes. We will call you when we land." Margot stood there. She did not scream. She did not cry. She simply nodded. She was a woman from a generation that was taught to never make a scene, to never be the cause of discomfort, even when you were the one being crushed. "It is fine," Margot said softly. Her voice sounded thin, like paper. "Do not worry about me. You all go. Have a good time." Mallory picked up her bag. "Okay, great," she said. "Bye, Grandma. Love you." She started walking toward the security checkpoint without looking back. Caleb followed her, looking sheepish but silent. Raymond and Diane exchanged a look, then turned to follow them. "Come on, Bella," Raymond called out over his shoulder. "Ethan, let us go. We do not want to miss the boarding group." I stood rooted to the spot. I looked at my parents walking away. I looked at my sister, who was already checking her phone again, and then I looked at my grandmother, standing alone in the middle of the terminal, holding her small floral bag, looking at the floor as if she wished it would open up and swallow her. I felt something inside me break. It was the final tether of loyalty I had to the people who raised me. "I am not going," I said. I did not shout it, but Ethan heard me. He nodded. "I will get the car," Ethan said. Raymond stopped. He turned around, frowning. "What did you say?" he asked. "I said I'm not going," I repeated, louder this time. I walked over to Margot. I put my arm around her shoulders. She was trembling now, a fine vibration running through her frail body. "You are being dramatic." "Bella," Raymond snapped, "do not ruin this trip. We paid for your ticket. Do not waste my money." "Your money?" I laughed. It was a cold, harsh sound. "You would not spend $800 to fix your own mistake, but you are worried about the sunk cost of my seat? Go to hell. Dad." Raymond's jaw dropped. I had never sworn at him in my life. "Bella!" Diane gasped. "Go," I said, pointing at the security gate. "Go have your real wedding planning session. Go celebrate your theft. We are going home." Ethan walked up to Raymond. He did not say a word. He just held out his hand. Raymond stared at him. "Give me the parking ticket," Ethan said. "We need to get the car out." Raymond fumbled in his pocket, intimidated by Ethan's absolute calm. He handed over the ticket. "You are making a huge mistake," Raymond spat. "The only mistake was thinking you were a decent man." Ethan replied. He turned his back on them. I took Margot's bag. We walked away. We walked against the flow of traffic, past the happy families and the excited tourists. We walked out of the terminal and into the humid gray air of the parking garage. The car ride back to Margot's house was silent for a long time. The silence was heavy, but it was not empty. It was filled with the realization of what had just happened. I sat in the back with Margot. I held her hand. Her skin felt like dry parchment. She stared out the window at the passing highway, at the billboards and the pine trees. "I am so sorry." "Grandma," I whispered, They forgot. They are just disorganized." Margot turned her head slowly to look at me. Her eyes were dry. There were no tears. There was only a deep, ancient sadness and a clarity that chilled me to the bone. "Do not lie to me, Bella," she said. I opened my mouth, but closed it. They did not forget. Margot said. She squeezed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "You do not forget to buy a ticket for someone you want to be there. You forget things that do not matter. You forget things that are in the way." She looked back out the window. "They decided," she said. "They decided I was not necessary. They decided I was a prop that cost too much to ship." I felt tears prick my eyes. "I am here." I said, "You are necessary to me." "I know," she said. "And that is why you are the only one who is going to know the truth." "What truth?" I asked. Margot did not answer until we pulled into her driveway. The house looked small and quiet under the oak trees. It looked like a sanctuary. We helped her inside. She took off her coat and hung it on the rack with slow, deliberate movements. She did not go to the kitchen to make tea. She walked straight into the living room, past her favorite armchair, and went to the large wooden bookshelf that covered the far wall. She reached up to the top shelf. There was a dusty cardboard box tucked behind a row of encyclopedias. It was an old file box, the kind you buy at an office supply store for $2. Ethan stepped forward and took it down for her. He set it on the coffee table. Margot sat down on the sofa. She patted the cushion beside her, gesturing for me to sit. "I have been keeping this for 20 years, she said. "I hoped I would never have to show it to anyone. I hoped your father would do the right thing. I hoped that if I gave him enough rope, he would build a bridge, not a noose." She placed her hand on the lid of the box. "But today, he left me at the airport," she said. "He treated me like a piece of lost luggage. And if he can do that to me, imagine what he is doing to you." She opened the box. Inside, there were no photos. There were no sentimental letters. It was full of bank statements, legal documents, carbon copies of checks from the 1990s. "If you want to know where the wedding fund actually came from," Margot said, looking at me with eyes that were suddenly fierce, "read this." She pulled out a thick file folder. It was labeled in her handwriting, "The Bishop Trust. Do not open." I looked at Ethan. He was standing by the window, his arms crossed, watching us. He nodded. I opened the folder, and as I read the first document, the floor fell out from under me for the second time that day. But this time, I was not falling. I was landing. I was finally landing on the solid ground of the truth. The dust from the cardboard box danced in the shafts of afternoon sunlight, filtering through Margot's lace curtains. It was a peaceful scene, deceptively so, considering we were currently dissecting the anatomy of a crime. The smell of old paper and mildew filled the room, a scent that usually reminded me of libraries and safety, but today it smelled like betrayal. Ethan sat on the floor, his long legs crossed, surrounded by piles of paper. He had organized the chaos of the box into 3 distinct stacks. The first stack was bank statements dating back 5 years. The second stack was correspondence from a law firm I did not recognize. The third stack, the one he was currently holding, contained the original formation documents for something called the Margot Hale Family Trust. I sat on the sofa next to my grandmother, holding a single sheet of paper. It was a statement from 3 months ago. "This is not a savings account," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "No," Ethan said, without looking up. He was scanning a ledger with the intensity of a bomb disposal technician. "It is an irrevocable trust, established 20 years ago, shortly after your grandfather passed away." I looked at Margot. "You set this up?" I asked. Margot nodded. She was sipping a cup of chamomile tea, her hands steady now, but her eyes were distant. "Your grandfather was a careful man," she said. "He did not trust the stock market, and he certainly did not trust your father's get-rich-quick schemes. When he died, he made me promise to lock the bulk of the estate away. He wanted it to be for emergencies, and for the grandchildren." She looked at me, her gaze softening. "He wanted you to have a start in life, Bella, and Mallory too. He said that a woman with her own money is a woman who can make her own choices. So we put $500,000 into the trust. It was supposed to generate interest. It was supposed to be safe. $500,000. I felt the air leave my lungs. I had assumed the wedding fund was maybe $20,000 or $30,000. A nice gesture. I had no idea we were talking about $500,000. Ethan flipped a page. He pulled a pen from his pocket and circled a series of numbers. "The structure of the trust is sound," Ethan said. "Technically, Raymond has no ownership rights. He is not a beneficiary. However, the document lists him as a secondary trustee with administrative privileges." He held up a document. "He was added 5 years ago." Ethan said. Margot sighed. She set her tea down. "That was the year I broke my hip," she said. "I was in the hospital for 3 weeks. Your mother said it was too much for me to handle the bills and the paperwork while I was recovering. Raymond offered to step in. He brought the papers to the rehabilitation center. He said it was just temporary, just to keep the lights on and the property taxes paid while I was under the medication, and he never removed himself." I said, "It was not a question." Ethan picked up the bank statements. He spread them out on the coffee table like a fan. "Here is where it gets interesting," he said. He pointed to the transaction column. For the first 4 years, the activity is normal. Utility bills, property taxes, insurance premiums, boring, standard maintenance costs. But starting 6 months ago, right around the time Mallory got engaged, the pattern changes. He traced a line with his finger. See this? $9,500 withdrawn on May 2nd, $9,000 withdrawn on May 9th, $9,800 withdrawn on May 15th. I frowned. Why those amounts? Why not just take out $30,000 if he needed it? Because of the Bank Secrecy Act, Ethan said grimly. Any cash transaction over $10,000 triggers a currency transaction report. It alerts the federal government to potential money laundering or fraud. By keeping the withdrawals just under $10,000, he is avoiding the automatic flag. In my line of work, we call this structuring, or smurfing. It is illegal. Bella. He looked at me, his eyes cold. Your father is not just stealing. He is actively covering his tracks. He knows exactly what he is doing. I felt a wave of nausea. This was not just a greedy father dipping into a jar. This was calculated. This was criminal. I picked up another statement. I looked at the digital transfers. Look at this one, I said, pointing to a line item from 2 weeks ago. $7,000 sent to TGO Event Holdings. Ethan tapped away on his phone for a few seconds. TGO Event Holdings, he read aloud. Doing business as the Gilded Oak. My stomach dropped. The Gilded Oak, Mallory's venue, the place with the crystal chandeliers and the $12,000 rental fee. He is paying the vendors directly from the trust, I said. He is not even moving it to his account first. He is using Grandma's life savings to pay for Mallory's party. And he is doing it transaction by transaction, so no one notices the balance dropping. I looked at the ending balance on the most recent statement. It was down to $120,000. He has drained nearly $400,000, I whispered. Margot made a small, wounded sound. She closed her eyes. He told me the market was down, she said softly. When I asked why the quarterly statements looked lower, he said the economy was bad. He said I should not worry my pretty little head about the numbers. Ethan stood up. He gathered the papers into a neat stack. We need a lawyer, he said, a real one. Not the family friend Raymond uses for his traffic tickets. We need an elder law specialist, and we need to see them tomorrow morning. The next morning. The sky was a bruised purple, heavy with rain. We drove into the city, leaving Margot's quiet garden for the steel and glass of downtown Charlotte. Ethan had made a few calls the night before, leveraging his professional network to get us an emergency appointment with a woman named Sarah Sterling. Ms. Sterling's office was intimidating. It was all polished chrome and abstract art, the kind of place that signaled expensive and ruthless efficiency. Ms. Sterling herself was a sharp woman in her 60s with a silver bob and glasses that hung on a chain around her neck. She listened to us without interrupting for 20 minutes. She looked at the documents Ethan had organized. She looked at the diagram he had drawn of the cash flow. Then she took off her glasses and looked at Margot. Mrs. Hale, she said, her voice gentle but firm. I need to ask you a very difficult question, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Margot nodded. I am ready. Who has your power of attorney? Ms. Sterling asked. Margot hesitated. She twisted the strap of her purse. Raymond does, she said, and Diane. They are joint agents. Ms. Sterling leaned forward. And do you remember signing that document? She asked. Do you remember why you signed it? Margot looked down at her lap. It was about 2 years ago, she said. I had left the kettle on the stove. It whistled for a long time, and I did not hear it because I was in the garden. The bottom of the kettle burned. It was a small thing, but Raymond, he made it sound like I had almost burned the house down. She took a deep breath. Then there were other things. Keys went missing. I would put them on the hook, and then they would be gone. Important mail would vanish. Diane would tell me I had forgotten appointments that I never knew I had. They told me I was slipping. They told me I was becoming a danger to myself. They said if I did not sign the power of attorney, the state might come in and put me in a home. They said they were doing it to protect me. I reached out and grabbed Margot's hand. My blood was boiling. It was gaslighting, pure and simple. They had made her doubt her own sanity to get control of her assets. I remember Mallory joking about it. I said suddenly, the memory hit me like a physical blow. Last Thanksgiving. She was laughing about how Grandma was losing her marbles. She said, "Do not worry. Dad is handling the reallocation of resources before she forgets where she buried the gold." I had thought it was just Mallory being cruel. I did not realize it was a confession. Reallocation of resources, that was exactly what they were doing. Ms. Sterling put her glasses back on. Her expression had hardened. "This is a classic case of financial exploitation," she said, "and because of the structuring evidence your fiancé found. We have a very strong case, but we have to move fast. If they are in Key West right now, spending money, they could drain the rest of the liquid assets before Monday. What do we do?" I asked. "First, we revoke the power of attorney immediately." "Ms." Sterling said, "I will draft the revocation document right now. We will have it notarized, and I will fax it to every financial institution where you hold accounts. That stops the bleeding." She pulled a yellow legal pad toward her. "Second, we file for a temporary restraining order on the trust assets. We freeze everything. No one moves a dime without a court order. Third," she continued, writing furiously, "we demand a full forensic accounting. Raymond will have to explain every single transaction, every dinner, every deposit, every check to a wedding planner, and if he cannot prove it was for Margot's benefit, he is liable for it." She looked up at Ethan. "You said you work in fraud detection?" Ethan nodded. "Good, Ms." Sterling said, "because the pattern you found suggests he knows he is breaking the law. That intent is crucial. It moves this from civil mismanagement to potential criminal theft." She turned back to Margot. "Mrs. Hale, if we do this, it is going to get ugly. Your son-in-law is going to lose access to the money he thinks is his. Your daughter is going to be furious. They will likely try to claim that you are incompetent and that Bella is manipulating you. They might try to file for guardianship to override your decisions. Are you prepared for that?" Margot sat up straighter. She looked at the woman who was offering her a sword to fight a dragon. "My son-in-law left me at an airport," Margot said. "He looked me in the eye and lied about a plane ticket because he did not want to spend $800 to fix his mistake. He thinks I am weak. He thinks I am just a confused old woman who is in the way of his daughter's perfect day." She looked at me, and then at Ethan. "I am not confused," Margot said firmly. "I am just disappointed, and I am done being quiet. Do it. Freeze it all, Ms." Sterling smiled. It was a sharp, predatory smile. "Excellent," she said. "I will get the notary." As we walked out of the office an hour later, the rain had stopped. The air was cool and clean. I felt lighter than I had in years. We had the revocation papers in hand. The banks had been notified. The credit cards were being canceled. Ethan walked beside me, his hand on the small of my back. "You okay?" he asked. "I do not know." I said honestly, "I feel like I just pressed a button that is going to blow up my entire family." "You did not press the button." "Bella," Ethan said, "Raymond built the bomb. He lit the fuse. All you did was move your grandmother out of the blast radius." He stopped walking and turned to me. His face was serious. "They are going to come for us," he said. "When the card gets declined, when the check bounces, when the venue calls Mallory and says the payment has been frozen, they are going to lose their minds. Let them—" I said. Ethan nodded. "They will not stop without consequences," he said softly. "People like Raymond never stop because it is the right thing to do. They only stop when they hit a wall. And we just built a 10-foot wall of reinforced concrete." I looked at my phone. It was silent. No calls yet. They were probably still at the resort, ordering room service, thinking they had gotten away with it, thinking Grandma was safe at home. Confused and helpless, thinking I was cowed and obedient, I put the phone in my pocket. "Let us go get some lunch," I said. I am starving. We walked down the street. 3 soldiers in a war that was about to turn nuclear, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the explosion. I was looking forward to the silence that would come after it. The fluorescent lights of the parking garage hummed with a low, electric buzz that sounded like a headache waiting to happen. It was Monday afternoon, and the air was thick with the smell of exhaust fumes and damp concrete. We were standing near the elevator bank on level 3, the spot where Raymond always parked because he claimed it was the most efficient exit route. I stood shoulder to shoulder with Grandma Margot. To her right stood Sarah Sterling, our attorney, who looked like a weapon sheathed in a charcoal gray suit. To my left was Ethan. He was leaning against a concrete pillar, his arms crossed, checking his watch with the patience of a predator who knows the prey has no other way out. We had been waiting for 20 minutes. We knew their flight had landed. We knew they had picked up their luggage. We knew they were coming. I felt a tremor in my hand and clenched it into a fist. This was not a family reunion. This was an ambush. But unlike the one they had sprung on us at the steakhouse, this one was legal, documented, and absolutely necessary. "Here they come," Ethan said softly. The elevator doors slid open with a cheerful ding. The sound of laughter spilled out first, loud and oblivious. Mallory walked out first, wearing a straw hat that looked ridiculous indoors and pulling a suitcase that was bursting at the seams. She was laughing at something Caleb had said. Diane followed, looking sun-kissed and relaxed, holding a duty-free bag. Raymond brought up the rear, dragging 2 large suitcases, his face flushed with the exertion, but smiling the smile of a man who believes he has successfully navigated a crisis. They did not see us immediately. They were too busy reliving their weekend. That lobster bisque was incredible. Raymond was saying, "We definitely have to book that place for the rehearsal dinner. It is worth the extra cost." Mallory nodded vigorously. "Totally," she said. "And did you see the way the manager treated us? That is the kind of service we need for the wedding. None of this budget nonsense Bella is always talking about." They turned the corner toward row C, and then they stopped. It was almost comical how quickly the laughter died. It was as if someone had cut the power to a stereo. Mallory froze mid-step, her hand flying to her mouth. Diane stopped so abruptly that Raymond almost ran into her. Raymond looked up. He squinted in the dim light. He saw me. He saw Margot. And then he saw the strangers. His smile evaporated, replaced by a look of confusion that rapidly curdled into irritation. He dropped the handles of the suitcases. They hit the concrete with a heavy clatter. "What the hell is this?" Raymond demanded. His voice echoed off the low ceiling. "Bella, we thought you went home to sulk. Why are you here? And why did you bring your grandmother out to a parking garage?" He started walking toward us, his chest puffed out, ready to bully his way through the situation as he always did. Margot stood her ground. She did not shrink back. She adjusted her glasses and looked him in the eye. "I am here to welcome you back, Raymond," Margot said. Her voice was steady, clearer than I had heard it in years. "And to make sure you do not forget me again." Raymond rolled his eyes. He waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, come on. Mom," he said. "We went over this. It was a mistake. We will make it up to you. We brought you some key lime pie. Now let us get in the car. I am tired." He reached for his keys. "Mr. Bishop?" Sarah Sterling stepped forward. Her heels clicked sharply on the pavement. She held a thick manila envelope in her hand. Raymond stopped. He looked her up and down, sneering. "Who are you?" he asked. "One of Bella's little friends?" "I am Sarah Sterling," Sarah said. "I am Mrs. Hale's attorney, and I'm advising you not to take another step toward my client until you have heard what I have to say." Raymond laughed. It was a dry, incredulous sound. "Attorney?" he repeated. "My mother-in-law does not have an attorney. I handle her legal affairs. I have power of attorney. Not anymore," Sarah said. She held out the envelope. "As of 9 o'clock this morning, your power of attorney has been revoked," she stated. "The revocation has been filed with the county clerk and faxed to every financial institution where Mrs. Hale holds assets. You no longer have the authority to sign a check, authorize a transfer, or access any account in her name. The color drained from Raymond's face. It happened instantly, like a curtain dropping. "What?" he stammered. "You cannot do that. She is not competent to make that decision. She is confused. I am standing right here." "Raymond," Margot said, "and I am not confused. I know exactly who I am, and I know exactly who you are. You are the man who left me at an airport because you deemed me too expensive to fix." Diane rushed forward, her face pale. "Mom, please," Diane pleaded. "This is ridiculous. Why are you making a scene in public? This is family business. We can talk about this at home." "Family business?" Margot repeated. She looked at her daughter with a mixture of pity and disappointment. "Diane, family is the one place where you need boundaries the most. Because strangers will only rob you once. Family will rob you for 20 years and tell you they are doing it for love." Mallory threw her hands up. She looked furious. "This is Bella, isn't it?" she snapped. She glared at me. "You are just jealous because Dad is helping me with the wedding and not you. So you brainwashed Grandma to try and cut off the money. You are pathetic, Bella. You are trying to ruin my moment because you cannot stand that I am happy." She turned her venom toward Ethan, who was still leaning against the pillar, watching the scene unfold with terrifying calm. "And who are you?" Mallory spat at him. "You are just standing there like a creep. Are you the one putting these ideas in their heads? You are a nobody. Ethan, you do not even have a real job. You are just here to leech off our family money." Ethan pushed himself off the pillar. He took 2 slow steps forward. He did not look angry. He looked like a doctor diagnosing a terminal illness. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen once and turned it around so they could all see. It was a graph, a jagged red line showing a series of withdrawals dropping off a cliff. "I do not want your money." "Mallory," Ethan said. His voice was low, but it carried perfectly in the concrete echo chamber. "In fact, I spend my days tracking people who take money that does not belong to them." He looked at Raymond. "You asked who I was," Ethan said. "I am a forensic accountant specializing in financial fraud detection and anti-money laundering compliance. I work with federal agencies to identify patterns of illegal structuring and embezzlement." Raymond's mouth opened slightly. His eyes darted from Ethan to the phone screen. "That pattern on the screen?" Ethan continued, pointing to the red line. "That is the activity in the Margot Hale Trust over the last 6 months. It shows 34 separate withdrawals, all just under the $10,000 reporting threshold. In my line of work, we call that structuring. It is a federal crime." The silence that fell over the parking garage was absolute. A car alarm chirped in the distance, but no one moved. Ethan swiped the screen to the next image. It was a flowchart showing money moving from the trust to a shell company, and then to the wedding venue. "I also found the direct payments to the Gilded Oak," Ethan said, "and the transfers to your personal account to cover the margin calls on your bad investments." He looked Raymond dead in the eye. "Now, usually, when I see a pattern like this, my next step is to file a suspicious activity report with the Treasury Department," Ethan said. "And once that happens, the accounts are frozen, and the IRS starts asking questions that you cannot answer without a lawyer who costs $500 an hour." Raymond looked like he was about to be sick. He knew exactly what Ethan was talking about. He had thought he was being clever. He had thought he was flying under the radar. He had no idea he had been sitting across the dinner table from a man whose entire career was built on catching people like him. You investigated me?" Raymond whispered. His voice was hoarse. "I protected my future wife," Ethan corrected, "and her grandmother." Sarah Sterling stepped in. Handing the envelope to Raymond, he took it automatically, his hands shaking. "These are the papers for a mandatory mediation," Sarah said. "We are filing a civil suit for breach of fiduciary duty and conversion of assets. We are also requesting a full accounting of every penny spent in the last 5 years." She paused, letting the weight of the threat sink in. "If you agree to return the funds and resign permanently from the trust, we might might be able to settle this without involving the authorities, but that depends entirely on your cooperation." Diane started to cry. It was a soft, weeping sound. "Raymond," she sobbed, "what did you do? You said the money was ours. You said it was a loan." Raymond did not answer her. He was staring at the envelope in his hands as if it were a bomb. He looked at me. His eyes were full of hate. He did not look like a father. He looked like a cornered animal. "You ungrateful little brat," Raymond hissed. He took a step toward me. "After everything I did for you, I put a roof over your head. I fed you, and this is how you repay me? By humiliating me in a parking lot?" He gesticulated wildly with the envelope. "You think you are smart?" Raymond snarled. "You think you can just walk in here and dictate terms to me? I am the head of this family. I made you." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had terrified me for my entire childhood, the man whose approval I had chased like a starving dog chasing a car, and I realized, with a sudden, crystal clarity, that he was small. He was just a small, greedy man who used loud noises to hide his fear. "I am not trying to be smart, Dad," I said. My voice was calm. I did not need to shout. The truth did not need volume. "Then what are you doing?" Raymond screamed. "You are tearing this family apart. You think you are winning? Is that it? You think you are winning?" I looked at Margot, who was standing tall and proud. I looked at Ethan, who was watching me with respect, and I looked at Mallory, who was staring at her father with a dawning realization that her dream wedding was dissolving into smoke. "No," I said, "I do not think I am winning." I stepped closer to him until I was right in his face. "I am just stopping the losing." I said, "I am stopping you from losing Grandma's dignity. I am stopping you from losing the last scrap of decency this family had, and I am stopping myself from being your victim." I turned to Sarah. "We are done here," I said. Sarah nodded. "Mr. Bishop, you have 24 hours to respond to the mediation request." She said, "If we do not hear from you, we file the civil suit and the criminal complaint on Wednesday morning. Have a nice day." We turned around. We walked toward the elevator. Behind us, I heard Mallory burst into tears. "My venue!" she wailed. "Dad, what about my venue?" "Shut up!" "Mallory!" Raymond roared. "Just shut up!" The doors of the elevator closed, cutting off the sound of their implosion. We stood in the quiet of the elevator cab. Margot leaned her head against my shoulder. She let out a long, shuddering breath. "Are you okay?" I asked her. She looked up at me and smiled. It was a tired smile, but it was genuine. "I feel lighter," she said. Ethan reached out and took my hand. He squeezed it. "You did good," he said. I looked at the numbers lighting up above the door. Level 1, ground floor. We were going down, but for the first time in my life. I felt like I was rising. As we walked out into the daylight, the sun was beginning to break through the clouds. It was a harsh, bright light, illuminating everything. It showed the cracks in the pavement. It showed the rust on the railings. It showed the world exactly as it was, and it was beautiful. But I knew this was not over. Raymond was cornered, and cornered animals bite. He would not give up the money easily. He would try to find a way out. He would try to spin the narrative. He would try to turn the rest of the family against us. Let him try. I thought. I looked at Ethan. I looked at the man who had quietly, methodically dismantled my father's lies with a few sheets of paper and a smartphone. We were ready. The drive back to Margot's house was different this time. We stopped at a diner on the way. We ate pancakes and drank coffee. We laughed. It was a real laughter, not the forced, polite chuckle of the Bishop dinner table. Margot told stories about my grandfather. She told us about how he used to hide cash in hollowed-out books because he did not trust the banks during the recession. She told us how he built the trust not just to save money, but to save us from the very greed that had consumed Raymond. "He knew," Margot said, stirring cream into her coffee. "He always said Raymond had a hole in his pocket where his soul should be." I looked at Ethan. "Did you really investigate him?" I asked. Or was that a bluff? Ethan took a bite of his toast. I never bluff. Bella, he said. I pulled the public records on his LLCs. I cross-referenced the property tax filings. And once we had the trust statements, the pattern was obvious. He looked at me seriously. He is in deep. Bella, it is not just the wedding. He has debts, gambling debts, maybe, or just bad leverage. The wedding fund was a lifeline for him. By cutting it, we are not just canceling a party, we are probably bankrupting him. I thought about that. I thought about my father. Bankrupt and disgraced. I tried to feel sorry for him. I tried to find that dutiful daughter instinct that had been programmed into me since birth. But I could not find it. All I could feel was relief. He did it to himself. I said, yes, Ethan agreed. He did. When we dropped Margot off, she hugged us both tightly. Thank you, she said, for giving me my voice back. We will see you tomorrow. I promised. We have a lot of work to do. As we drove home to our apartment, my phone started buzzing. It was a notification from Facebook. Then another. Then another. I looked at the screen. Mallory had posted a status update. Some people are so jealous they will destroy their own family just to get attention. Heartbroken that my own sister would attack my father and try to ruin my wedding. Please pray for us during this difficult time. I read it out loud to Ethan. He laughed. The court of public opinion. He said, that is their last resort. I put the phone down. Let her post. I said, comments do not pay the bills, and likes do not keep you out of prison. We pulled into our driveway. I looked at our small, modest apartment building. It was not a mansion. It did not have columns or a 3-car garage, but it was ours. And every brick of it was paid for with honest money. I walked inside, kicked off my shoes, and sat on the couch. I felt exhausted. But it was a good exhaustion. It was the exhaustion of a runner who has just finished a marathon. I closed my eyes. I could still hear Raymond's voice echoing in the garage. You think you are winning? I smiled. I was not winning a game. I was ending one. And for the first time, I held all the aces. The war did not start with a bang. It started with a vibration. My phone began buzzing at 6 a.m. on Tuesday, less than 24 hours after the confrontation in the parking garage. I rolled over, blinking against the harsh light of the screen, and saw the name Aunt Linda flashing. Linda was my father's sister, a woman who lived in Ohio and consumed family gossip like it was oxygen. I answered, my voice thick with sleep. Bella, Linda said immediately, her voice dripping with that specific kind of concern that masks an accusation. I just got off the phone with your father. I am shaking. I am literally shaking. I sat up, rubbing my eyes. Ethan shifted beside me, instantly awake, his eyes narrowing as he recognized the tone of the conversation. What did he tell you? Linda? I asked. He said you are in trouble, she whispered. He said you have joined some kind of cult, or that this new boy, this Ethan, is controlling you. Raymond said Ethan has cut you off from your finances and is forcing you to attack the family to isolate you. He was crying. Bella, I have never heard your father cry. I felt a cold, hard knot form in my stomach. It was brilliant, in a sick, twisted way. Raymond knew he could not win on the facts. The math was against him. The law was against him. So he had decided to destroy the credibility of the witness. He was painting me as a victim of coercive control to hide the fact that he was the abuser. He is lying. Linda, I said, keeping my voice steady, Ethan is not controlling me. We found out Dad has been stealing from Grandma Margot's trust fund. We have proof. Oh, honey, Linda sighed, the sound condescending and pitying. Raymond told me you would say that. He said Ethan has been feeding you these paranoia stories. That is how they get you. Bella, they turn you against the people who love you. Please, just come home. Your dad wants to pay for you to see a therapist. I hung up. I did not say goodbye. I just ended the call. I looked at Ethan. He is calling everyone. I said, he is telling them you are brainwashing me. Ethan sat up and ran a hand through his hair. He looked remarkably unbothered. It is the Darvo tactic, he said simply. Deny, attack, And reverse victim and offender. He's trying to delegitimize you so that when the lawsuit hits, the family will think it is just a delusion of your abuse. He stood up and walked to the kitchen to make coffee. Let him talk, Ethan said over the sound of the grinder. The truth is in the ledger. Opinions do not hold up in court, but the court of public opinion was a different beast, and my sister was its chief justice, by noon. The notifications on my social media were relentless. Mallory had posted a photo on Instagram. It was a picture of her and Raymond from her childhood. Looking happy and innocent, the caption was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive manipulation. It breaks my heart when jealousy tears a family apart. Some people cannot stand to see others happy, so they invent lies to ruin special moments. Dad, thank you for always being our rock. Even when snakes try to bite you, we will not let the haters stop our big day. Family first love wins. Toxic people, the comments were a cesspool. Cousins I had not seen in 5 years were commenting, "Stay strong and ignore the negativity." My high school friends were liking it. To the outside world, I was the bitter, unsuccessful sister trying to sabotage the golden child's wedding. I wanted to scream. I wanted to post the bank statements. I wanted to upload the audio of Raymond screaming at me in the garage. Do not engage. Sarah Sterling had warned us. Any public statement you make can be twisted. Silence is your shield. So I stayed silent, but silence is heavy. It presses down on your chest until it is hard to breathe. That afternoon, the war moved from the digital world to the physical one. I was at Grandma Margot's house, helping her sort through the rest of the paperwork in the box. We were looking for the original deed to her house, just to ensure Raymond had not leveraged that too. There was a knock at the door. I watched through the sheer curtains as a silver Mercedes pulled into the driveway. It was my mother. Diane walked up to the porch. She was not crying today. She was wearing a crisp linen dress and carrying a casserole dish covered in aluminum foil. In her other hand, she held a blue folder. I opened the door. I did not step aside to let her in. "Hi." "Mom," I said. Diane smiled. It was a tight, brittle smile that did not reach her eyes. "Bella," she said, "I brought Mom's favorite, chicken pot pie. I thought we could all have a nice lunch and just reset." She tried to step past me. I moved to block her path. "Margot does not want visitors right now." I said. Diane's smile faltered. "I am not a visitor. Bella, I am her daughter, and I need to get her signature on a few things." The pharmacy called. They need an updated authorization for her blood pressure medication. It is just standard paperwork. She held up the blue folder. It looked innocent enough. I reached out. "Let me see it," I said. Diane pulled the folder back against her chest. "Do not be silly," she said, her voice sharpening. "It is medical privacy. You do not need to read it. I just need Mom to sign the bottom line so she does not run out of pills. Do you want her to have a stroke?" Margot walked up behind me. She looked small but resolute. "Give the folder to Bella." "Diane," Margot said. Diane sighed, a sound of exaggerated patience. She handed the folder to me. I opened it. The top page was indeed a pharmacy privacy notice, but underneath it, stapled to the back, was a document titled Durable Power of Attorney. It was a new one. It reinstated Raymond and Diane as agents, with full control over all assets, and included a clause that explicitly revoked any previous revocations. It was a trap, a clumsy, desperate trap. She was hoping Margot would just sign the pharmacy form without checking the pages underneath. I looked at my mother. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I almost dropped the casserole. "You tried to trick her," I said. My voice was shaking. "You brought a pot pie and a contract to sign away her freedom." Diane's face twisted. The nice mother mask fell away, revealing a desperate, frightened woman. "We need access." "Bella," she hissed, "the accounts are frozen. The check for the florist bounced this morning." Do you have any idea how embarrassing that is? Raymond is frantic. He needs to move money to cover the margin call or we lose the house. "So you are stealing from her again?" I asked. "To save yourself?" "It is not stealing," Diane shouted. "It is family money. It all goes to the same place eventually. Why are you doing this?" Why are you being so cruel? I handed the folder back to her. Get out, I said. Diane looked at Margot. Mom, please, she begged. Raymond is going to have a heart attack. He is under so much pressure. Just sign it. Fix this. Margot looked at her daughter. I did not cause the pressure. Diane, Margot said softly, and I will not sign. If you need money, sell the boat, sell the cars, but do not come here and try to trick me into paying for your husband's mistakes. Diane stood there for a moment, trembling with rage. Then she turned and threw the casserole into the flower bed. The dish shattered, scattering chicken and pastry over the hydrangeas. I hope you're happy. She spat at me. You have destroyed everything. She marched back to her car. I watched her drive away. I looked at the broken dish in the dirt. They are getting desperate. I said, desperate people make mistakes. Margot said. She called a cleaning service to come deal with the mess. She refused to clean it up herself. She said she was done cleaning up their messes. The next mistake happened 2 hours later, and it was fatal. Mallory was at the Gilded Oak. I knew this because she had posted a location tag an hour earlier with the caption, finalizing the menu. So excited. But things were not going as planned. Ethan received an alert on his phone. He had set up a monitoring system for the trust account using the guest access Sarah Sterling had secured. They just tried to run a payment for $20,000. Ethan said, to the Gilded Oak. Did it go through? I asked. No, Ethan smiled. Sarah's restraining order kicked in at 9 this morning. The transaction was declined. I could only imagine the scene. Mallory, standing in that crystal ballroom, handing over a card or a check, only to have the manager return it with a polite, devastating shake of the head. Mallory did what Mallory always did when she heard the word no. She screamed, and then she called for backup. She did not call Raymond, because Raymond wasn't answering her calls. He was too busy trying to liquidate his own failing stocks. So she called the one person she thought could bully the world into submission for her. She called Caleb Vance, her fiancé, was a man I had always liked. Mostly because he seemed harmless. He was a landscape architect, quiet, hardworking, and seemingly oblivious to the toxicity of the Bishop family. He loved Mallory, or at least, he loved the version of Mallory she presented to him. He thought she was a princess. He did not know she was a warlord. Caleb met her at the venue. We found this out later, but I can picture it as clearly as if I were there. Mallory was in the manager's office, hysterical. The manager, a man named Mr. Henderson, was holding a printout. I am sorry. Mrs. Bishop, Mr. Henderson was saying, the bank has flagged the source of funds as suspicious. We cannot accept payments from this trust account until the flag is cleared, and since the previous deposit was also drawn from this source. Our legal team is advising us to hold all services. What do you mean, hold services? Mallory shrieked. The wedding is in 6 weeks. We cannot host an event funded by potentially illicit assets. Mr. Henderson said, it is a liability issue. Caleb walked in right at that moment. He had come straight from a job site, wearing his work boots. What is going on? Caleb asked. Mallory, why are you crying? Mallory spun around. They are ruining it, she sobbed. Bella and her stupid boyfriend did something to the bank accounts. They froze Daddy's money. You have to pay them. Caleb, use your savings. Write them a check. Caleb frowned. He looked at Mr. Henderson. What do you mean? Froze the money? Caleb asked. I thought Raymond was paying for this. He was, Mallory cried. But Bella blocked the account because she is jealous. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. He looked uncomfortable. Actually, sir, he said to Caleb, the notification we received is from a law firm representing a Mrs. Margot Hale. It states that the funds used for the deposit were misappropriated from an elder care trust. Caleb froze. Margot? He said. Mallory's grandmother? Mallory grabbed Caleb's arm. Do not listen to him. It is a lie. It is just a mix-up. Just pay him. Caleb, we can fix it later. Caleb pulled his arm away. He looked at Mallory. He looked at the frantic desperation in her eyes, and for the first time, He saw past the eyelashes and the perfect smile. Misappropriated? Caleb repeated. You mean stolen? Mallory stomped her foot. It is not stolen. It is family money. Grandma does not need it. She is old. She is going to die soon anyway. Why does it matter if we use it now? The room went silent. Even Mr. Henderson looked shocked by the callousness of the statement. Caleb took a step back. He looked at Mallory as if she were a stranger. She is your grandmother, Caleb said softly. She is the woman who knits you a scarf every Christmas. And you think it is okay to take her life savings because you want… what? A chocolate fountain? I deserve this wedding, Mallory screamed. I have planned it since I was 5. I am not going to let a senile old woman and my loser sister take this away from me. Caleb looked down at his hand. He was wearing a simple silver engagement band that Mallory had bought him. He looked up at Mr. Henderson. I apologize for the disturbance, Caleb said. His voice was calm, but dead. He turned to Mallory. Let us go to the car, he said. No, Mallory yelled. Not until you pay him. I said. Let us go to the car, Caleb said. The tone of his voice was one she had never heard before. It was the tone of a door slamming shut. Mallory followed him out, thinking she could still manipulate him. I know this because she texted me 10 minutes later, blaming me for the fight. But the fight did not end the way she wanted. I was sitting on the porch with Ethan when a truck pulled into the driveway. It was Caleb's truck. Mallory was in the passenger seat, mascara running down her face. Caleb got out. He walked up the steps. He looked exhausted. Is it true? Caleb asked me. He did not even say hello. Did Raymond take the money from Margot without her knowing? I looked at him. I could see the hope in his eyes. The tiny sliver of hope that wanted me to say, it was all a misunderstanding. Yes, I said. He has been draining the trust for 5 years. The wedding was just the final straw. He booked Grandma a fake ticket to get her out of the way, so they could spend the rest of the money this weekend. Caleb closed his eyes. He exhaled a long, shaky breath. Mallory claims she did not know. Caleb said, She says she thought it was Raymond's money. I pulled out my phone. I opened the folder of screenshots Ethan had compiled. Here is a text from Mallory to Dad 3 months ago, I said, handing him the phone. I watched him read it. Dad, make sure you transfer the next chunk from Grandma's account before the venue deadline. I do not care if you have to forge the signature. Just get it done. Caleb stared at the screen. The evidence was absolute. She knew. She had not only known, she had ordered it. He handed the phone back to me. His hand was shaking. He turned around and walked back to the truck. Mallory rolled down the window. Did you tell them off? Mallory demanded. Did you tell them to fix it? Caleb opened the driver's side door. He did not get in. He reached into the cab and turned off the engine. Get out, Caleb said. What? Mallory asked. Get out of my truck, Caleb said. You are at your grandmother's house. You can stay here, or you can call your father. But you are not coming with me. Mallory laughed nervously. Caleb, stop joking. We have a tasting at 5. Caleb looked at her. He reached for his left hand. He twisted the silver ring. It was tight, but he pulled it off. He tossed the ring onto her lap. It landed with a dull thud against her designer jeans. There is no tasting, Caleb said. There is no wedding. Mallory stared at the ring. Her face went pale. You cannot do this, she whispered. The invites are out. People are coming. I do not care, Caleb said. He looked at her with a profound sadness. I fell in love with a girl I thought was sweet, Caleb said. I thought you were kind. I thought we were building a life, but you are just a bottomless pit of want. You would eat your own family if it meant you could have a prettier centerpiece. He slammed the door shut. Caleb! Mallory screamed. She scrambled to open her door. Caleb! You can't leave me. I have a plan. We have a plan. Caleb stood on the gravel. He looked at her one last time. I am not marrying a plan. Mallory, he said. He turned to me. I am sorry. Bella, he said. Tell Margot. Tell her I am sorry I almost helped them do it. He started walking down the driveway. He did not take the truck. He left the truck with her. He just walked, his boots crunching on the gravel, heading toward the main road, walking away from the disaster as fast as his legs could carry him. Mallory sat in the truck for a full minute, stunned silence radiating from the vehicle. Then, the screaming started. She got out of the truck and ran toward me, her face contorted into a mask of pure hate. "You did this!" she shrieked, charging up the steps. "You ruined my life!" Ethan stepped in front of me. He did not touch her. He just stood there, a solid wall of calm. "Go home, Mallory," Ethan said. Mallory stopped. She looked at Ethan. She looked at me. She looked at the empty road where Caleb had disappeared. Then she collapsed on the bottom step and began to wail. It was the sound of a child who has finally been told no, but it was also the sound of a woman realizing that for the first time in her life. The check was not going to clear. I looked down at her. I felt a flicker of pity, but it was distant, like watching a stranger cry on television. "You did not lose him because of me, Mal," I said softly. "You lost him because you thought he was something you could buy." I turned and went back inside to sit with Margot. The war was far from over, but the enemy was beginning to eat itself alive. The 6 weeks that followed the parking garage confrontation were not loud. There were no more screaming matches in public, no more hysterical phone calls at dawn, and no more dramatic breakups in driveways. The noise of the Bishop family drama died down, replaced by the terrifying, clinical silence of a legal investigation. We called it the excavation. We set up a command center in the conference room of Sarah Sterling's law office. It was a sterile room with glass walls, a long mahogany table, and a view of the city skyline that looked deceptively orderly. For 42 days, that room became my world. It smelled of toner, stale coffee, and the specific dusty scent of old secrets being dragged into the light. Ethan, Sarah, and I spent our days building a wall, but unlike the walls my father built, which were made of bluster and intimidation, our wall was made of paper, bank statements, email logs, IP address histories, digital signature certificates. Every scrap of data was a brick, and we were laying them row by row, sealing Raymond inside a prison of his own making. The first major breakthrough came in the second week. Ethan was analyzing the outflow of cash from the trust during the year my father claimed to be managing the remodel of Margot's kitchen. "I found something," Ethan said. His voice was flat, the way it always was when he found a smoking gun. I walked over to where he sat with his laptop connected to the main monitor. On the screen was a complex web of transactions. "Look at this vendor," Ethan said, pointing to a recurring payment. RB, Holdings and Logistics. The trust paid them $4,500 a month for 18 months. The memo line says property management and maintenance. I frowned. Grandma does not have a property manager. I said, "She mows her own lawn, and when the roof leaked, she hired Mr. Henderson down the street." "Exactly," Ethan said. He typed a few keys. I pulled the incorporation papers for RB Holdings. It is a limited liability company registered in Delaware 3 years ago. The registered agent is a generic service. But the principal address? He zoomed in. "It is a P.O. box in a strip mall 3 miles from your parents' house," Ethan said, "and the authorized signatory is Raymond Bishop." I felt a cold chill run down my spine. He was paying himself. I whispered, "He was laundering it." Sarah corrected. She was standing at the head of the table, reviewing a stack of affidavits. He created a fake vendor to bill the trust for services that never happened. It is classic embezzlement. He was not even trying to hide it that hard. He just assumed no one would ever look. But why? I asked. Why did he need that much cash? Dad makes good money. The boat? The cars? I thought he was rich. Ethan sighed. He opened another window. This one showed a graph that looked like a jagged mountain range crashing into the ocean. "He is not rich." "Bella?" Ethan said. "He is leveraged." I cross-referenced his personal credit report, which I can do because he is listed on the trust documents, with public market data. 5 years ago, Your father put a massive amount of capital into a speculative biotech startup. He bought in at the peak. He traced the line down. The stock crashed 6 months later. Ethan said he lost nearly 60% of his portfolio, but instead of cutting his losses, he doubled down. He borrowed against the house, he maxed out his credit lines, and when the margin calls started coming in, he needed liquid cash to stop the bank from seizing his assets. I stared at the screen. The dates aligned perfectly. The crash happened 2 months before he convinced Margot to sign the power of attorney. He did not take control of her money to help her. I realized he took it because he was drowning. He was robbing Peter to pay Paul. Sarah said, and in this case, Peter was your grandmother. The betrayal did not stop with Raymond. The deeper we dug, the more the rot spread to the rest of the family. In the 4th week, we uncovered the truth about my mother. I had wanted to believe, desperately, that Diane was just a victim. I wanted to believe she was the battered wife, too afraid to speak up, blindly signing whatever Raymond put in front of her. But the digital forensic report shattered that illusion. We found a document titled Acknowledgement of High-Risk Investment Strategy. It was a waiver authorizing the trust to move $100,000 into a volatile cryptocurrency exchange. The document was signed electronically by Margot Hale. But Grandma does not have an email address, I said, looking at the printout. She does not even own a computer. Look at the metadata. Ethan said. He pointed to the timestamp and the IP address. The document was signed on a Tuesday at 10 in the morning. Ethan explained. The IP address traces back to the Bishop household Wi-Fi. And look at the device ID. He highlighted a string of code. That is an iPad. Ethan said, specifically, an iPad Pro. 3rd generation. I felt sick. Mom's iPad. I said, she's the only one who uses it for her recipes. Ethan nodded. And look at the access log. He said, the user spent 40 minutes on the page. They scrolled. They read the terms. This was not a blind signature. Bella. Whoever signed this knew exactly what they were authorizing. They knew they were gambling with Margot's safety net. I remembered that Tuesday. I remembered calling my mother and hearing her sound cheerful, telling me she was just handling some boring paperwork for Daddy. She had sat there, drinking her coffee, and knowingly signed her mother's name to a document that allowed Raymond to throw $100,000 into a digital fire. She is not a victim, I said, my voice hardening. She is an accomplice. Then there was Mallory. I had hoped, perhaps naively, that Mallory was just a spoiled brat. I hoped she was simply unaware of where the money was coming from, blinded by her own entitlement. But the discovery process required Raymond to surrender his email and text communications regarding the trust. And what we found in those logs ended any hope of reconciliation. We found a text thread from 6 months ago. It was right before the deposit for the Gilded Oak was due. Raymond, I am trying to move the funds, but the bank is asking for a secondary verification because it is a large amount. It might take a few days. Mallory, I do not care what the bank wants. Dad, if we lose this date, I am going to kill someone. Just transfer it from the grandma account in smaller chunks like you did for the caterer. She will never know. Just get it done. She will never know. I read those 4 words over and over again. They burned into my retinas. Mallory knew. She knew about the structuring. She knew about the source. She knew about the deception. She had not just accepted the stolen money, she had advised him on how to steal it more efficiently. Ethan printed the screenshot. He placed it in the binder labeled Exhibit C. That is intent, Sarah said quietly. That text message proves she was an active participant in the conspiracy to defraud. If this goes to trial, your sister is not just a witness. She is a co-defendant. Throughout those 6 weeks, Ethan was the anchor. He never raised his voice. He never gloated. He treated the destruction of my family with the clinical detachment of a coroner determining a cause of death. One afternoon, I watched him preparing the visual aids for the mediation. He was creating a timeline, color-coding the thefts. Do you hate them? I asked him. Ethan looked up from his laptop. He took off his glasses and cleaned them with his shirt. Hate is an emotion. Bella, he said, emotions are messy. They cloud your judgment. What I feel is a professional obligation to correct an error. He put his glasses back on. Your father thinks he is playing a game of power. Ethan continued. He thinks if he yells loud enough, or if he uses his status as the patriarch, the numbers will change. But math does not care about your ego. The ledger does not care if you are a father. It only cares about the balance. He looked at me, and his eyes softened slightly. I do not hate them. He said, I just want to make sure they can never hurt you or Margot again, and the best way to do that is not to scream at them. It is to hand them a bill they cannot pay. While Ethan handled the numbers, I handled Margot. The hardest part of the preparation was not the paperwork. It was getting my grandmother ready to speak. Margot had spent 40 years making herself small to accommodate Raymond's ego. She had learned to bite her tongue. She had learned to apologize for taking up space. Unlearning that survival mechanism took practice. We spent hours in her living room. I would play the role of the mediator or Raymond. So, Mrs. Hale, I would say, using my best lawyer voice, did you perhaps give your son-in-law verbal permission to use these funds? Margot would look down at her hands. I do not think so. She would stammer. He said, No, Grandma. I interrupted gently. Stop. Do not look at your hands. Look at me. And do not say what he said. Say what you know. We did it again, and again, and again. By the 5th week, something shifted. I asked the question again. Mrs. Hale, did you authorize this transfer? Margot looked me dead in the eye. Her back was straight. Her hands were folded calmly in her lap. No, she said clearly. I did not. The money was intended for my care and for my granddaughter's future. It was not intended to cover Raymond's gambling debts. I smiled. Good, I said. That was perfect. Margot took a sip of tea. I am not doing this for the money. Bella, she said, I do not care about the numbers in the bank. I am 82 years old. I have enough to buy my seeds and my yarn. Then why? I asked. Because I want to hear him admit it, she said, just once. I want to hear him say that he is not the king of the world. I want to hear him admit that he needed me. I realized then that I was going through my own transformation. For my entire life, I had been the peacekeeper. I had been the one who smoothed things over, who absorbed the shocks to keep the family steady. I thought that was my job. I thought that was love. But as I looked at the mountain of evidence, the lies, the thefts, the casual cruelty, I realized that I had not been keeping the peace. I had been enabling the war by staying silent, by accepting the scraps. I had taught them that I was cheap. I had taught them that I could be discarded. The night before the mediation, I stayed at Margot's house. Ethan had gone home to get a fresh suit and some sleep. The house was quiet. Margot and I sat on the porch swing, watching the fireflies dance in the darkness. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine and impending rain. Tomorrow is going to be hard, I said. They are going to cry. They are going to beg. Dad is going to try to make us feel like monsters. Margot rocked the swing gently. The chains creaked a slow, rhythmic tune. Let him try, she said. She reached over and took my hand. Her skin was thin, but her grip was iron. Bella, she said, I want you to promise me something, anything. I said, tomorrow, when we walk into that room. She said, do not apologize. I looked at her. What do you mean? I mean it, Margot said. Women like us, we are taught to apologize for everything. We apologize for being in the way. We apologize for asking for what is ours. We apologize for making men uncomfortable with the truth. She turned to face me, the moonlight catching the silver in her hair. Tomorrow, Raymond is going to be very uncomfortable, she said. He is going to be humiliated, and your instinct will be to say you are sorry. You will want to soften the blow. You will want to offer him a tissue. She squeezed my hand harder. Do not do it, Margot commanded. Do not apologize for demanding justice. Do not apologize for seeing the truth. You let him sit in that discomfort. You let him feel the weight of what he did. That is the only way he will ever learn." I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. "I promise," I whispered. Margot smiled. She patted my hand. "Good," she said. "Now let us go to sleep. We have a big day tomorrow. We have a giant to slay." I lay in bed that night, listening to the wind in the oak trees. I thought about the binder of evidence sitting on the kitchen table. It was 3 inches thick. It contained the complete autopsy of my father's integrity. I thought about the little girl I used to be, the one who hid in the hallway while her sister got the applause. I thought about the woman I was becoming. I realized that for the first time in 35 years, I was not afraid of the morning. I was not afraid of what Raymond would say, because I knew, with absolute certainty, that the truth was louder than he could ever be. I closed my eyes and slept the deep, dreamless sleep of the righteous. The conference room at the mediation center was designed to de-escalate conflict. The walls were painted a soothing shade of sage green. The lighting was soft and diffused, and the chairs were upholstered in a neutral gray fabric that whispered compromise. But as I sat there, flanked by my grandmother and my fiancé, I knew that no amount of interior design could soften the jagged edges of the hatred sitting across the table. On one side sat the plaintiffs, Margot Hale, Bella Phillips, and Ethan Mercer, represented by Sarah Sterling. On the other side sat the defendants, Raymond Bishop, Diane Bishop, and Mallory Bishop, represented by a man named Arthur Pym, a lawyer my father had hired 2 days ago who looked like he had not slept in a week. At the head of the table sat Mr. Silas, the court-appointed mediator. He was a retired judge with a face carved from granite and eyes that had seen every variation of human greed imaginable. He arranged his notepad and pen with meticulous precision, then looked up at us over the rim of his reading glasses. "We are here to discuss the petition regarding the Margot Hale Family Trust." "Mr. Silas said. His voice was gravelly and low. "The goal is to reach a settlement regarding the misappropriation of funds and the future management of Mrs. Hale's assets without proceeding to a full trial. Mr. Bishop, would you like to begin?" Raymond straightened his tie. He was wearing his best suit, the charcoal one he wore to funerals and board meetings. He looked confident, but I could see the sweat beading at his hairline. He cleared his throat and put on his best Father of the Year face. "Thank you, Your Honor," Raymond began, addressing the mediator as if we were already in court. "I want to state for the record that this entire situation is a gross misunderstanding. Everything I have done, every transaction I have authorized, has been for the benefit of this family." He gestured broadly to include us, but his eyes avoided mine. "I took over the management of Margot's finances because she was overwhelmed." Raymond continued, "I moved funds to protect them from market volatility, and yes, I used some liquidity to help with family expenses, including Mallory's wedding, but the intention was always to pay it back. It was a loan, an interfamily loan. We are a family. We help each other." Mr. Silas did not nod. He did not smile. He simply wrote something down on his notepad. "Mr. Bishop, Mr. Silas said, "You claim these were loans. Do you have any loan agreements? Any promissory notes signed by Mrs. Hale?" Raymond shifted in his seat. "Well, not formally," Raymond said. "It was a verbal understanding. Margot knows I'm good for it. We have a relationship of trust." Sarah Sterling leaned forward. She did not look at Raymond. She looked at Mr. Silas. "Mr. Silas," Sarah said, her voice cutting through the room like a scalpel. "The trust instrument specifically requires written authorization for any withdrawal over $1,000 that is not for the direct medical or housing needs of the beneficiary." She slid a piece of paper across the table. "This is the trust deed," Sarah said. "Clause 4, Section B, no loans permitted to trustees. Period." Raymond's lawyer, Mr. Pym, picked up the paper and whispered something in Raymond's ear. Raymond waved him off. "That is a technicality," Raymond snapped. "My mother-in-law gave me permission. She was sitting right there when we discussed it." She said she wanted Mallory to have the wedding of her dreams. Mr. Silas turned to Margot. Mistress, Hale, Mr. Silas asked, did you give your son-in-law permission to withdraw $400,000 from your trust for his personal use and for your granddaughter's wedding? Margot did not flinch. She sat with her hands folded on the table. She looked at Raymond, and the sadness in her eyes was far worse than anger. No, Margot said clearly, I did not. Raymond slammed his hand on the table. Mom, he shouted, how can you lie like that? We talked about it at Easter. Mr. Bishop, sit down. Mr. Silas ordered. The command was quiet, but it had the weight of a gavel. Diane, who had been weeping silently into a tissue since we sat down, suddenly spoke up. Her voice was high and trembling. We take care of her, Diane cried. We do everything for her. We drive her to her appointments. We buy her groceries. We invite her to dinner every Sunday. We have sacrificed so much to make sure she is not lonely. And this is how she thanks us? By suing us? She looked at me, her eyes red and swollen. You do not understand. Bella. Diane sobbed. We are the ones who do the work. You just visit when it is convenient. We are the ones who care for her day in and day out. Margot turned to look at her daughter. Diane, Margot said softly. Diane stopped crying for a second to listen. Driving me to the doctor is kindness. Margot said, but charging me $400,000 for the ride is theft. The room went dead silent. Care is not holding someone else's wallet. Diane, Margot continued, you did not take care of me. You took advantage of me. You convinced yourself that because you bought me dinner once a week, you were entitled to my life savings. Diane gasped and buried her face in her hands. Raymond put his arm around her, glaring at Margot. You are twisting everything, Raymond hissed. Mallory, who was sitting at the far end of the table, had her arms crossed over her chest. She was wearing sunglasses indoors, likely to hide the fact that she had been crying for 2 days straight. I did not know. Mallory muttered, I thought it was Dad's money. I had no idea it was coming from the trust. I am a victim here too. Ethan, who had been silent until now, reached into his briefcase. He pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was the screenshot of the text message we had found. Sarah took the paper and slid it down the table toward Mallory. Ms. Bishop, Sarah said, is this your phone number ending in 5549? Mallory looked at the paper. I saw her throat move as she swallowed hard. Yes, Mallory whispered. Sarah read the text aloud. Dad, make sure you transfer the next chunk from Grandma's account before the venue deadline. I do not care if you have to forge the signature. Just get it done. Sarah looked at Mallory. You did not know? Sarah asked. Or you did not care? Mallory did not answer. She shrank into her chair, pulling her cardigan tighter around herself as if she were cold. The sunglasses could not hide the flush of shame rising up her neck. Raymond tried to intervene. She was stressed, Raymond argued. It was a stressful time. She was just venting. It is just a text message. It does not prove anything. Actually, Ethan said, speaking for the first time, it proves conspiracy to commit fraud. But if you want proof of intent, we have that too. Ethan took out his phone. He placed it in the center of the table. I recorded our dinner at the steakhouse. Ethan said, I have a habit of documenting hostile interactions when large sums of money are involved. He pressed play. The audio was slightly grainy, capturing the ambient noise of clinking silverware and murmuring patrons, but the voices were crystal clear. We gave your wedding fund to her. Raymond's voice boomed from the speaker. She deserves a real wedding. Ethan paused the recording. She deserves it, Ethan repeated. You did not say you borrowed it. You did not say it was a mistake. You said you gave it to her because you decided she deserved it more than the person who actually owned the money. That is not a loan, Raymond. That is a unilateral appropriation of assets. Raymond stared at the phone. He looked like he wanted to smash it. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. The misunderstanding defense had just been obliterated by his own voice. Silas sat back in his chair. He took off his reading glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Mr. Bishop, Mr. Silas said, "I have seen enough." He looked at Raymond with a mixture of sternness and fatigue, based on the evidence presented, the lack of written consent, the text messages indicating knowledge of the source, and the audio recording admitting to the transfer. It is my opinion that a court would find you liable for civil conversion and breach of fiduciary duty. Mr. Silas leaned forward, and frankly, given the structuring of the withdrawals to avoid federal reporting requirements, I believe a district attorney would be very interested in pursuing criminal charges for financial exploitation of an elder. Raymond paled. The word criminal hung in the air like toxic smoke. "So here is my recommendation, Mr. Silas continued. "You will repay the full amount of $380,000 to the trust within 30 days. You will resign immediately as trustee. You will surrender all keys and access codes to Mrs. Hale's property, and you will agree to a permanent independent financial monitor for any future interactions with the estate." Raymond looked at his lawyer. Mr. Pym nodded slowly, signaling that this was the best deal he was going to get. Raymond took a deep breath. He loosened his tie. He looked at the table, calculating. He was a gambler, and even when he was losing, he was trying to find an angle. "Fine," Raymond said, his voice tight. "I will liquidate the portfolio. I will sell the boat. I will pay back the cash." He looked up at Margot, and suddenly, his eyes narrowed. "But I have one condition," Raymond said. Sarah frowned. "You are not in a position to make conditions. Mr. Bishop, if you want the money back without a 2-year court battle," Raymond countered, "I will pay it back, but the will stays exactly as it is." I blinked. "The will?" Raymond pointed a finger at Margot. "You are not writing me out of the will," Raymond said, "and you are not writing Mallory out either. When you die, the estate is split 50-50 between Bella and Mallory, with Diane as the executor. That was the original agreement. I will pay back what I took now, but I want a guarantee that my inheritance is protected." I felt my jaw drop. He was sitting there, accused of stealing $500,000, facing potential jail time, and he was negotiating his future payout. He did not care about the morality of what he had done. He only cared that he would eventually get the rest of the money when Margot died. Diane nodded beside him, drying her eyes. "Yes, Mom," Diane said. "It is only fair. We are still family. You cannot just cut us off." Margot looked at them. She looked at them for a long time. She looked at the daughter she had raised and the son-in-law she had welcomed into her home. "You care more about the will than you do about the apology," Margot said. Her voice was ice cold. "It is about fairness." "Mom," Raymond said, "I am agreeing to pay you back, but I need to know that you are not going to punish us from the grave." Margot shook her head slowly. "You think the money is the punishment," Margot said. "You poor, sad man." Sarah Sterling reached into her briefcase. She did not look at Raymond. She looked at me, and gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. She pulled out a thin blue folder. It was dusty. It looked old. "Actually, Mr. Bishop," Sarah said, "there is one more thing." She placed the folder on the table. "This is the original trust agreement from 20 years ago," Sarah said, "but I think you and your lawyer might have missed the addendum attached to the back. It was filed separately with the original firm, so it would not have been in the digital copy you accessed when you took over." Raymond frowned. "What addendum?" he asked. Sarah opened the folder. She turned to the last page. The bad actor clause. Sarah said. She spun the document around so Raymond could read it. "My late husband, Mrs. Hale's husband, was a very thorough man." Sarah explained. "He included a specific provision regarding the inheritance. It states that any beneficiary or trustee who is found to have misappropriated assets from the estate, or who attempts to defraud the primary beneficiary, is automatically and irrevocably disinherited." Raymond's eyes bulged. He grabbed the paper. His hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled against the table. "What?" he choked out. "It is self-executing," Sarah said calmly. "You do not need to negotiate the will." Mr. Bishop, the moment you transferred that first dollar out of the trust for your own use, you triggered the clause. You wrote yourself out of the will 5 years ago." Raymond stared at the paper. He read the lines over and over again. "And Mallory?" he whispered. Sarah nodded to the text message evidence still sitting on the table. "Anyone who assists in the misappropriation." Sarah said, "Mallory knew. She helped. She is out too." The room was silent. Raymond looked up. His face was gray. The arrogance was gone. The bluster was gone. He looked like a man who had just watched his house burn down, only to realize he had been the one holding the matches. "You cannot do this," Raymond whispered. That is millions of dollars. The house, the land, it is not your house," Margot said. "And it never was." Raymond slumped back in his chair. He looked at Diane. "Did you know about this?" he asked his wife. Diane looked terrified. I forgot," she stammered. "Daddy wrote it so long ago. I didn't think—" Raymond put his head in his hands. "Mr." Silas cleared his throat. "Well, Mr." Silas said, his voice devoid of sympathy. "It seems the terms of the settlement have just become much simpler. You will repay the stolen funds to avoid prison. Mr. Bishop, but as for the inheritance, that ship has sailed." I looked at my father. He was broken. Not because he was sorry, but because he had lost the one thing he loved more than himself. He had lost the gold at the end of the rainbow, and as I watched him crumble, I realized that Margot was right. We did not need to scream. We did not need to fight. We just needed to read the fine print. The silence that followed the revelation of the bad actor clause was heavy enough to crush lungs. It was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of a guillotine blade hanging at the top of its arc, waiting for gravity to do its work. Raymond Bishop sat frozen. The color had drained from his face so completely that his skin looked like old parchment. He stared at the blue folder Sarah Sterling had placed on the table, as if it were a radioactive isotope. "You are bluffing," Raymond whispered. His voice was dry, cracking under the strain. "You are trying to scare me into settling. There is no way a clause from 20 years ago holds up. I am the legal heir. I am the husband of the only daughter." Sarah Sterling did not blink. She did not raise her voice. She simply tapped the document with her index finger. "It is not a bluff. Mr. Bishop," she said. "It is a contract. A contract your late father-in-law wrote specifically because he feared this exact scenario. He knew you. He knew your ambition often outpaced your ethics. And he knew that one day, you might decide that waiting for an inheritance was too slow." Raymond looked at Diane. He looked at his wife with a desperate, frantic intensity. "Diane, say something," he pleaded. Tell them we are family. Tell them your father would not have wanted this." Diane was weeping into a tissue, her shoulders shaking. She looked up, her eyes red and swollen. "I did not know. Raymond," she sobbed, "I swear I did not know about the clause. Daddy never told me. It does not matter if you knew." Sarah interrupted. "The law does not require you to be aware of the trap for the trap to work. It only requires you to step in it." Raymond stood up. His chair scraped violently against the floor. He began to pace the small room, his hands running through his hair. "Okay," he said. "Okay. Listen, we can fix this." He turned to Margot. He put on a smile that was terrifying in its artificiality. It was the smile of a salesman trying to sell a car with no engine. "Mom," he said, "look, I made a mistake. I admit it. I borrowed the money without asking. It was wrong. I will pay it back. I will sell the boat. I will cash out my retirement. I will write you a check for $380,000 by Monday morning. Every cent." He took a step toward her. "But you have to sign a waiver," he said. "You have to sign a document stating that the withdrawal was authorized retroactively. If you do that, the clause is nullified. We go back to normal. The will stays as it is. We remain a family." He paused, his eyes pleading. "Please, Mom, do not destroy us over a wedding fund. That estate is worth $5 million. The land alone is worth 3. You cannot cut us out of that. We have plans. I have leveraged debts based on that future equity. I watched him. I watched the man who had raised me, the man who had terrified me, the man who had demanded perfection while living a lie, and I saw him for what he truly was. He was not a patriarch. He was a parasite. He was not asking for forgiveness. He was asking for a signature so he could keep his spot in the queue for the payout. Margot looked at him. She adjusted her glasses. She looked calm, composed, and utterly immovable. "Raymond," she said softly. "Yes?" Raymond asked, hope flaring in his eyes. "You still do not get it," she said. "Get what?" "It is not about the money," Margot said. She pointed to the folder. "My husband wrote that clause because he wanted to know that the people standing by his deathbed were there because they loved us, not because they were checking their watches." She leaned forward. "You stole from me. Raymond, you stole from me while I was alive. You stole my security. You stole my trust. And worst of all, you tried to steal my relationship with my granddaughter by making her think I did not care about her." Raymond wiped sweat from his upper lip. "I will pay it back," he shouted. "I said I will pay it back. You cannot pay back trust," Margot said. "And you cannot buy your way back into a will that you burned with your own greed." Mr. Silas, the mediator, cleared his throat. "Mr. Bishop," he said. "Ms. Sterling is correct. The clause is self-executing upon the finding of financial malfeasance, by admitting to the unauthorized transfer on the audio recording, and by the evidence of the structuring. The condition has been met. You are effectively disinherited as of the date of the first transfer." Raymond collapsed back into his chair. He looked like he had been shot. $5 million, he muttered. Gone. Because of a wedding. Mallory, who had been sitting in stunned silence, suddenly erupted. She ripped her sunglasses off and threw them across the table. They skittered across the mahogany surface and landed in front of me. "This is your fault!" Mallory screamed, pointing a manicured finger at me. "You planned this. You knew about the clause. You waited until we spent the money so you could trap us." She turned to Margot, her face twisted with ugliness. "And you let us do it. You sat there and let Dad pay the deposits because you wanted to ruin us. You are evil. You are a vindictive old witch." The room went silent. The insult hung in the air. Gross and toxic. Margot did not yell. She did not cry. She simply looked at her granddaughter with a profound pity. "I did not plan this. Mallory," Margot said, "I hoped I would never have to use it. I hoped that raising you with love would be enough. But your grandfather was a wise man." She paused. "He planned for the possibility that his family might one day forget their ethics," she said, "and it seems he was right." Mallory opened her mouth to scream again, but the door to the conference room opened. A man walked in. He was wearing work boots, jeans, and a flannel shirt. He held a clipboard in his hand. It was Caleb. Mallory's face changed instantly. She went from rage to a desperate, clawing hope. "Caleb," she cried. "Thank God. Tell them we need the money for the venue. Tell them we have a contract." Caleb did not look at her. He walked past her as if she were a piece of furniture. He walked up to Mr. Silas and placed the clipboard on the table. "I was told I needed to be here to sign the release of liability," Caleb said. His voice was steady, but I could hear the pain underneath it. "Mr. Silas nodded. "Yes, Mr. Vance, since your name is on the contract for the Gilded Oak, we need your signature to confirm that you are withdrawing from the agreement and that any cancellation fees will be the sole responsibility of the Bishop family." Caleb took a pen from his pocket. He leaned over and signed the document with a quick, sharp scrawl. "Caleb, no!" Mallory shrieked. She grabbed his arm. "You cannot cancel the venue. We can fix this. Dad is going to pay it back. We just need time." Caleb pulled his arm away. He turned to face her. "There is no we, Mallory," he said. "What do you mean?" Mallory wept. "I love you. We are getting married in 6 weeks." Caleb looked at her. He looked at Raymond, who was staring at the floor. He looked at the folder that contained the proof of their theft. "I love the girl I thought you were," Caleb said, "but I cannot marry a woman who is willing to swallow her own grandmother to get a centerpiece." He looked at me. "I am sorry, Bella," he said. "I am sorry I did not see it sooner." He looked at Margot. "I hope you get every penny back, Mrs. Hale," he said. And then, without looking back at the sobbing woman who was supposed to be his wife, Caleb Vance walked out of the room. The door clicked shut behind him, sealing the fate of the Bishop family. The mediation ended 20 minutes later. Raymond agreed to a repayment plan because he had no choice. He agreed to resign as trustee because he had no choice. And he accepted the reality that the fortune he had counted on for 20 years was gone. As we walked out of the building, the sun was setting over Charlotte. It bathed the city in a warm, golden light. I looked at my father, my mother, and my sister walking to their car. They looked smaller than I remembered. They were arguing, their hands waving, their voices sharp and bitter. They were trapped in a prison of blame they would never escape. I turned to Ethan. I turned to Margot. "Let us go home," I said. 3 months later, I got married. It was not at the Gilded Oak. There were no crystal chandeliers. There was no $12,000 rental fee. There was no 3-tier fondant cake that tasted like cardboard. We held the ceremony in Margot's backyard. The garden was in full bloom. The hydrangeas were bursting with blue and purple flowers. The air smelled of jasmine and fresh-cut grass. We had 50 guests. Just the people who actually loved us. Caleb was there, standing on the groom's side, looking happier and lighter than I had ever seen him. I wore a simple white dress that I had bought off the rack for $300. It fit perfectly. When the music started, a string quartet playing a song Ethan and I loved, everyone stood up. I did not walk down the aisle alone, and I did not walk down the aisle with my father. Raymond had not been invited. Neither had Diane or Mallory. They were currently busy selling their house to pay back the trust, and I had decided that my wedding day was a day for truth, not for pretenses. I stood at the back of the garden. Next to me stood Margot. She was wearing a beautiful silver dress and holding a small bouquet of lavender. "Ready?" she asked, offering me her arm. "Ready," I said. We walked down the grassy aisle together. The woman who had saved me, the woman who had seen me when I was invisible, the woman who had taught me that silence was not weakness. When we reached the altar, Margot kissed my cheek. She took my hand and placed it in Ethan's. "Take care of her," she said to him. "I always will." Ethan promised. The ceremony was short. It was honest. And when we said our vows, I felt a sense of peace so profound it made me dizzy. Later that night, as the fireflies came out and the string lights twinkled in the oak trees, Ethan and I stepped away from the party for a moment. We stood by the fence, watching our friends laugh and dance. "You know," Ethan said, holding a glass of champagne, "we could have used some of the money," Margot offered. She wanted to give us a big check. "I know," I said, "but you said no." He said. I looked at him. I looked at the ring on my finger. It was simple. It was real. I did not want a wedding fund. I said, "I wanted a marriage." Ethan smiled. He kissed my forehead. "Your father called me yesterday," he said. I stiffened. What did he want? He wanted to know if I could help him with his resume. Ethan said, "Apparently, he is having trouble finding a job in finance with a fraud settlement on his record." I laughed. It was a genuine, bubbling sound. "What did you tell him?" "I told him I charge $500 an hour," Ethan said, "and that I require a retainer up front." We both laughed then. We laughed until our sides hurt. We laughed because the monster under the bed had turned out to be nothing more than a man in a cheap suit. I looked back at the party. I saw Margot dancing with Caleb. She was laughing, her head thrown back. I realized then that the best revenge was not the lawsuit. It was not the money. It was not even the humiliation of my father. The best revenge was this. It was standing in a garden, surrounded by love that cost nothing, with a man who respected me, and realizing that I did not need anyone's permission to be happy. I had spent my whole life waiting for my father to give me my value. I thought he held the keys to my worth, But the truth was, the keys had been in my pocket the whole time. I squeezed Ethan's hand. "Come on," I said. "Let us go dance." We walked back into the light, leaving the shadows where they belonged. Thank you so much for listening to my story about how one dinner changed everything and exposed the truth about my family. I would love to hear from you in the comments section below. Please tell me where you are listening from, whether it is your morning commute or a quiet evening at home, because I love connecting with this community. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please subscribe to the channel Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and smash that hype button to help this story reach even more people who need to know that sometimes the quiet ones bite the hardest.